In the fog-choked shadows of a London night, a cryptic letter slips under Hercule Poirot's door. Sealed with a blood-red crescent moon, it beckons him to Ravenwood Manor, a gothic labyrinth of secrets for a masquerade ball where a deadly cipher holds the key to a hidden truth. Who sent this chilling invitation? Why does the mysterious Order of the Crescent guard a treasure worth killing for? As midnight strikes, a scream shatters the revelry. A guest lies dead, clutching a coded note. Poirot's razor-sharp mind dives into a web of masked deceivers, ancient riddles, and murderous ambition, from hidden passages to a crystalline device that could topple empires. Each clue pulls him deeper into danger. Will he unmask the killer before the midnight cipher claims another life? In a manor where no one is who they seem, one question burns: what secrets lie beneath the crescent moon? Chapter 1. The enigmatic invitation. Fog clung to the cobblestones of Whitehaven Mansions, like a jealous lover, wrapping the elegant London street in a shroud of mystery. Inside his impeccably ordered flat, Hercule Poirot sat in his favorite armchair, a delicate porcelain teacup balanced in his manicured hands. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the room's polished surfaces, each item placed with the precision of a man who believed symmetry was the cornerstone of a civilized mind. His mustache, waxed to perfection, twitched slightly as he read the morning's correspondence. A ritual as sacred to him as the pursuit of truth itself. The letter that now held his attention was an anomaly, an intrusion into the orderly rhythm of his day. It had arrived without fanfare, slipped under his door sometime in the night, its presence announced only by the faint rustle of paper against the polished floorboards. The envelope was heavy, made of cream vellum, sealed with a deep crimson wax bearing the impression of a crescent moon. No return address, no name. Only the words Monsieur Hercule Poirot written in an elegant, looping script that suggested both refinement and secrecy. Poirot's little gray cells, as he fondly called them, stirred with curiosity. He slit the envelope with a silver letter opener, its blade glinting in the firelight, and extracted a single sheet of paper. The message was brief, yet its words carried a weight that piqued his interest. Monsieur Poirot, your reputation as a man of unparalleled intellect precedes you. On the eve of the 15th, you are cordially invited to Ravenwood Manor for a masquerade ball, where secrets veiled in shadow await. A cipher, known only to a few, holds the key to a truth most perilous. Come, if you dare, and unravel the mystery of the midnight cipher. The crescent moon guides those who seek, yours in mystery, the Orderno's signature. Only that same crescent moon embossed at the bottom, its curve sharp as a scythe. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind already dissecting the letter's implications. A masquerade ball, a cipher, a secret society. This was no ordinary invitation. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown at the feet of his intellect. He leaned back, sipping his tea, the steam curling upward like the tendrils of a puzzle yet to be solved. Ravenwood Manor was unfamiliar to him, but the name conjured images of ancient stone and hidden passages. A fitting stage for such an enigmatic summons. The 15th was tomorrow. There was little time to prepare, yet Poirot felt no urgency, only the calm certainty of a man who trusted his mind to navigate any labyrinth. He rose, smoothing his waistcoat, and crossed to his desk, where a small leather-bound notebook awaited. With a fountain pen, he jotted down the key phrases: midnight cipher, Ravenwood Manor, the order, crescent moon. Each word was a thread in a tapestry he would soon weave into clarity. He telephoned his old friend, Chief Inspector Japp, hoping for insight into Ravenwood Manor or the so-called order. But Japp's gruff voice offered little beyond a vague recollection of the manor as an old estate in Kent owned by the late Lord Ravenwood, a reclusive aristocrat with a penchant for the occult. Sounds like a rum lot, Poirot, Japp had said, chuckling. Mind you don't get tangled up with ghosts and goblins. Mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice smooth as velvet. It is not the spirits I fear, but the living who hide behind masks. By the following evening, Poirot found himself in a chauffeured car, gliding through the misty Kent countryside. The driver, a taciturn man with a scar above his left eyebrow, said little, his focus fixed on the winding road. Poirot, dressed in an immaculate black tuxedo with a silver tippet, adjusted the silk mask that covered his eyes. It was simple, unadorned, chosen to complement his understated elegance, rather than conceal his identity. The invitation had specified a masquerade, and Poirot, ever meticulous, complied. Though he suspected the true mask at Ravenwood would be woven of lies rather than fabric. The manor loomed into view as the car crested a hill, its silhouette stark against the twilight sky. Ravenwood Manor was a Gothic masterpiece, its turrets piercing the fog like the spires of some forgotten cathedral. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and the windows glowed with the flickering light of chandeliers, promising warmth but hinting at secrets. The car rolled to a stop before a grand oak door, where a liveried footman awaited, his face obscured by a porcelain mask painted with gold filigree. Poirot stepped out, his polished shoes clicking on the gravel, and handed over the invitation. The footman examined it, nodded, and gestured for him to enter. The foyer was a cavern of opulence, its marble floor inlaid with a mosaic of a crescent moon, echoing the seal on the letter. Guests mingled beneath a vaulted ceiling, their voices a low hum, their faces hidden behind masks of feathers, velvet, and lace. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the crowd, noting the details that betrayed their owners, the nervous twitch of a gloved hand, the overly confident stride of a man hiding fear, the subtle glance of a woman assessing her surroundings. He was not here to dance or revel. He was here to observe, to listen, to unravel. A tall figure in a crimson cloak approached, their mask a stark white oval with no features save for two dark eye holes. "Monsieur Poirot," they said, their voice low and genderless, "welcome to Ravenwood. The night promises much, but beware the midnight cipher claims those who seek it unwisely." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache curving slightly. "And I, monsieur or madame, am never unwise. Tell me, what is this cipher you speak of?" The figure chuckled, a sound like dry leaves. "All in good time. Enjoy the ball, detective. The truth reveals itself at midnight." They melted into the crowd, leaving Poirot with more questions than answers. He accepted a flute of champagne from a passing tray, sipping it sparingly as he moved through the ballroom. The music, a haunting waltz played by a string quartet, filled the air. But Poirot's attention was on the guests. A retired colonel, his chest puffed with military pride, boasted loudly about his campaigns. A glamorous heiress, her diamonds sparkling under the chandelier, laughed brightly, her eyes darting to the shadows. A nervous scholar, clutching a worn notebook, hovered near the edges of the room, his mask slipping slightly to reveal a sheen of sweat. And then there was the figure in a black velvet mask, silent, watching from a corner, their presence like a storm cloud on the horizon. Poirot's observations were interrupted by the tolling of a distant clock, its chimes reverberating through the manor. 11 o'clock. 1 hour until midnight, when, he presumed, the promised revelation would occur. He drifted toward the scholar, whose anxious demeanor suggested he knew more than he let on. "Pardon, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice warm but probing. "You seem most interested in your notebook. Is it, perhaps, a study of ciphers?" The scholar started, nearly dropping his book. "Oh, no. Just notes on history, Ravenwood's history, you know. Fascinating place." His eyes flicked to the side, betraying a lie. Poirot smiled, his tone disarming. "History. It is a treasure trove. And yet, I sense you are a man who seeks more than dusty tomes. Perhaps a cipher, one that shines under the crescent moon." The scholar paled, stammering. But before he could respond, a piercing scream shattered the ballroom's elegance. The music halted, the dancers froze. and all eyes turned toward the grand staircase. A woman in a silver gown lay crumpled at its base, her mask askew, her chest still. In her hand, clutched tightly, was a slip of paper covered in strange, angular symbols of cipher. Poirot was at her side in an instant, his movements swift but controlled. He knelt, checking for a pulse, but her skin was already cooling. The crowd pressed closer, their murmurs rising like a tide. Murder, someone whispered. She was poisoned, cried another. Poirot ignored them, his focus on the paper. The symbols were unlike any he had seen, part mathematical, part alchemical, a puzzle designed to confound. He slipped the note into his pocket, his mind already racing to preserve the evidence. The host, a tall man in a gold-trimmed mask who introduced himself as Lord Ravenwood's nephew, called for order. Please, remain calm. The authorities will be summoned, but we are isolated here. The fog is too thick for travel tonight. Poirot stood, brushing his knees. Non, monsieur. There is no need to wait for the authorities. Hercule Poirot is here, and I shall uncover the truth. His voice carried a quiet authority, silencing the crowd. He turned to the host. This woman, who was she? Miss Clara Vane, the host replied, his voice tight. A guest, like you. She spoke of a treasure, something hidden in the manor. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A treasure, you say, and this note, it is perhaps a key to it. Tell me, monsieur, what do you know of the midnight cipher? The host hesitated, his mask hiding his expression, but Poirot noted the slight clench of his fists. Only rumors. My uncle was obsessed with it, a myth, nothing more. Yet someone believed it enough to kill. Poirot said softly. He addressed the crowd. Mesdames et messieurs, return to your rooms. Lock your doors. I shall begin my investigation at once. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered by the staircase, his mind a whirl of connections. The letter, the cipher, the crescent moon, the murder. This was no random act. Someone in this manor sought the midnight cipher, and they were willing to kill to possess it. He glanced at the note in his pocket. Its symbols a challenge to his intellect. The little gray cells were at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that promised danger and revelation. The chapter closed with Poirot ascending the staircase, his steps deliberate, his eyes scanning the shadows. He would unravel this cipher, expose the killer, and bring order to the chaos of Ravenwood Manor. The night was young, and the truth, like the crescent moon, was only just beginning to rise. The ballroom, now empty save for the echoes of the waltz, seemed to hold its breath. Poirot paused at the top of the staircase, his hand resting on the banister, his mind already mapping the manor's secrets. The fog outside thickened, sealing Ravenwood in a cocoon of mystery. But Poirot was undeterred. He had faced many puzzles, many murderers, and he had never been defeated. The midnight cipher was a challenge worthy of his intellect, and he would not rest until its secrets were laid bare. He moved toward the library, guided by an instinct that the answers lay among the manor's ancient tomes. The corridor was lined with portraits, their eyes seeming to follow him, their painted faces silent witnesses to the night's events. Poirot's footsteps echoed softly, a counterpoint to the distant ticking of a clock. 11:30, 30 minutes until midnight. He quickened his pace, the cipher note burning in his pocket like a talisman. The library was a vast chamber, its shelves towering to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes that smelled of age and secrets. A chandelier cast flickering shadows, and Poirot's eyes swept the room, searching for anything out of place. A large oak table dominated the center, strewn with papers and an inkwell, as if someone had been working late. He approached, his fingers brushing the edge of a book left open, a treatise on cryptography, its pages marked with annotations in a hurried hand. Poirot's heart quickened. This was no coincidence. He sat, pulling the book closer, and began to read. The annotations referenced the crescent moon, linking it to an ancient order that guarded a treasure of immense value. The midnight cipher, it seemed, was not merely a code, but a key to something tangible, something hidden within Ravenwood's walls. He turned to the cipher note. Comparing its symbols to those in the book, a pattern emerged, faint but promising. A sequence that suggested a location within the manor. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft creak, the sound of a floorboard under pressure. Poirot froze, his senses alert. Someone was in the library with him. He rose silently, slipping the cipher note back into his pocket, and moved toward the shadows. A figure darted behind a shelf, their silhouette fleeting but unmistakable. The black velvet mask. Poirot's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. "Show yourself, monsieur or madame. There is no need for games." No response, only the faint rustle of fabric. Poirot stepped forward, his hand on the silver teepin, which concealed a small blade of precaution he rarely needed but always carried. The figure moved again, faster this time, and Poirot gave chase, weaving through the shelves. He caught a glimpse of a cloak, dark as midnight, before the figure vanished through a side door. Poirot followed, emerging into a narrow corridor lined with tapestries. The corridor led to a spiral staircase, descending into darkness. Poirot hesitated, weighing the risk. The cipher, the murder, the masked figure, all were connected, and the answers lay ahead. He descended, his steps cautious, the air growing cooler with each step. At the bottom, he found a heavy iron door, slightly ajar. Beyond it was a chamber, lit by a single lantern, its walls carved with crescent moons. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a small wooden box inlaid with silver. Poirot approached, his eyes narrowing. The box was locked, its surface etched with symbols matching those on the cipher note. He reached into his pocket, comparing the note to the box. The symbols aligned, but the lock required a key he did not yet possess. He ran his fingers over the box, searching for a hidden mechanism, but found none. The answers were close, yet still out of reach. A sudden noise behind him, a footstep, deliberate and heavy. Poirot turned, but the chamber was empty. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with malice. He straightened, his resolve unshaken. The midnight cipher was more than a puzzle. It was a test, and Hercule Poirot would not fail. He left the chamber, locking the door behind him, determined to find the key and unmask the figure in the black velvet mask. As he returned to the library, the clock struck midnight. The chimes echoed through the manor, a solemn reminder of the invitation's promise. Poirot stood alone, the cipher note in one hand, the treatise on cryptography in the other. The night had begun with a challenge, and now it had claimed a life. But Poirot was undaunted. He would unravel the midnight cipher, expose the killer, and restore order to Ravenwood Manor. The chapter ended with him seated at the oak table, the firelight glinting off his teepin, his little gray cells working tirelessly to illuminate the shadows of truth. Chapter 2. Shadows in the ballroom. The grand ballroom of Ravenwood Manor shimmered under the glow of a dozen chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering light across the polished parquet floor. The air was thick with the scent of roses and wax, mingling with the faint musk of anticipation. Masked figures swirled in elegant dances, their costumes a riot of silks, velvets, and feathers, each face concealed behind an elaborate disguise. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the room, his small, fastidious frame almost lost in the opulence, yet his sharp eyes missed nothing. His black patent leather shoes gleamed, his mustache was impeccably waxed, and his evening suit was tailored to perfection. As always, the cryptic invitation, with its crescent moon seal, rested in his pocket, a constant reminder of the enigma that had drawn him here. The scream that had shattered the midnight hour still echoed in his mind. It had come from the east wing, near the grand staircase, where a guest, a portly man in a Venetian mask, had been found sprawled on the marble floor, his lifeless hand clutching a scrap of paper covered in strange symbols. The local constable, a nervous young man named Harris, had declared it a murder. Though the cause of death was unclear, no blood, no visible wounds, just the man's glassy eyes staring into eternity, and the coded note crumpled in his fist. Poirot had examined the body briefly before the authorities arrived, noting the absence of struggle and the peculiar rigidity of the corpse. Poison, perhaps, or something more arcane. His little gray cells were already at work, piecing together the puzzle. Now, as the guests resumed their uneasy revelry, Poirot moved through the ballroom with the grace of a cat, observing, listening, deducing. The manor's host, a reclusive figure who had not yet made an appearance, was rumored to be a distant relative of the late Lord Ravenwood, whose wealth and eccentricity had built this sprawling estate. The invitation had promised a night of mystery, but no one had anticipated murder. Yet Poirot sensed this was no random act. The coded note, the crescent moon seal, the whispers of a secret society, these were threads in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. He paused near a gilded table laden with champagne flutes, his gaze settling on a group of guests who stood out amidst the crowd. First, there was Colonel Reginald Hawthorne, a retired military man with a bristling mustache and a crimson mask adorned with gold braid. His booming voice carried over the music, recounting tales of campaigns in India to anyone who would listen. His posture was rigid, his eyes darting, as if he expected an attack at any moment. Poirot noted the way his hand lingered near his waist, where a soldier might once have carried a saber. A man accustomed to command, but perhaps not to subtlety. Nearby, Lady Beatrice Langley, a glamorous heiress in a silver gown and a peacock feather mask, held court among a cluster of admirers. Her laughter was bright, but her eyes were guarded, flitting toward the shadows as if seeking something or someone. Her wealth was legendary, inherited from a shipping magnate father, but rumors swirled of debts and scandals. Poirot recalled a snippet from a society column. Lady Beatrice had been linked to Lord Ravenwood years ago, before his mysterious death. Could that connection be relevant? Her fingers toyed with a diamond bracelet, betraying a nervous energy beneath her polished exterior. Across the room, a nervous scholar, Professor Clarence Elgin, hovered near a marble pillar, his owl-like mask slightly askew. His hands clutched a worn leather notebook, and his eyes darted between the pages and the crowd. Poirot had overheard him earlier, muttering about ancient ciphers and alchemical symbols. A man of intellect, perhaps, but one who seemed ill at ease in this glittering company. Was his anxiety due to the murder, or did he know more about the coded note than he let on? Finally, Poirot's gaze fell on a figure who stood apart, cloaked in a black velvet mask that obscured all but the sharp line of a jaw. The figure moved with a predator's grace, slipping through the crowd without engaging, their dark cloak blending into the shadows. They had been near the east wing when the scream rang out, Poirot recalled, though they had vanished before he could question them. Who were they, and why did they avoid scrutiny? The crescent moon seal on the invitation flickered in his mind. Could this figure be its sender? The orchestra struck up a waltz, and the guests paired off, their masks creating an illusion of anonymity. Poirot declined an offer to dance from a giggling debutante, preferring to remain on the sidelines. He sipped a glass of mineral water. Champagne dulled the senses and let his mind work. The coded note, which he had memorized before it was taken by Constable Harris, was a jumble of symbols, circles, triangles, and lines that resembled no known alphabet. Yet there was a pattern, a rhythm to it, like a melody waiting to be played. Poirot's knowledge of ciphers was vast, from Masonic codes to naval signals, and he suspected this one was a substitution cipher, perhaps layered with a secondary meaning. The dead man's identity was still unknown, but his attire, a costly silk suit and a gold pocket watch, suggested wealth and status. Why had he been targeted, and what did the note conceal? As the waltz reached its crescendo, Poirot noticed a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. The guests' laughter was forced, their glances furtive. The murder had cast a pall, and whispers of a hidden treasure were spreading like wildfire. Poirot overheard a snippet of conversation between two masked women near a tapestry. They say Ravenwood hid a fortune in these walls, something to do with that wretched order. The Order of the Crescent, perhaps. The invitation seal suggested a connection, but Poirot needed evidence, not rumors. He approached Colonel Hawthorne, who was now alone, polishing off a glass of brandy. "Monsieur le Colonel," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet, "you have seen much of the world, n'est-ce pas? Have you encountered symbols such as those found on the unfortunate guest?" He described the coded note vaguely, watching the Colonel's reaction. Hawthorne's mustache twitched. "Symbols, bah. Probably some nonsense from a secret society. Ravenwood was mixed up with all sorts of odd fellows, cults, mystics, you name it. I'd wager it's a prank gone wrong." His tone was dismissive, but his eyes flickered with unease. Poirot nodded politely, filing away the Colonel's defensiveness. A man who protests quickly often has something to hide. Next, Poirot approached Lady Beatrice, who was fanning herself near an open window. "Madam, the tragedy of this evening is most distressing," he began, bowing slightly. "Did you, perhaps, know the gentleman who met such an unfortunate end?" Her fan paused mid-flutter. "Know him? Why, no, Monsieur Poirot. I barely saw him before. Well, before it happened." Her voice was light, but her fingers tightened on the fan. Snapping a feather, Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. She was lying, or at least concealing something. He made a mental note to investigate. Her connection to the victim later, Professor Elgin, proved more forthcoming, though no less nervous. When Poirot mentioned the coded note, the scholar's eyes lit up behind his mask. "Symbols, you say? I've studied such things: Babylonian, Egyptian, even Rosicrucian. If you could describe them," Poirot demurred, citing the constable's custody of the note, but Elgin's enthusiasm confirmed his expertise. Could he have crafted the cipher himself, or was he merely eager to solve it? The mysterious figure in the black velvet mask remained elusive, slipping out of sight whenever Poirot drew near. Frustrated but undeterred, he turned his attention to the ballroom itself. Ravenwood Manor was a labyrinth of secrets, its walls adorned with tapestries and portraits that seemed to watch the guests. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the room, seeking anomalies. Near the far wall, behind the velvet curtain, he noticed a faint seam in the paneling, barely visible in the chandelier's glow. It was too precise to be accidental, a hidden panel. Perhaps excusing himself from the crowd, Poirot approached the curtain, feigning interest in a nearby painting. When no one was watching, he pressed the panel, and it clicked softly, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside lay a dusty journal, its leather cover embossed with a crescent moon. His heart quickened. This was no coincidence. Tucking the journal under his coat, he returned to the ballroom, his expression serene but his mind racing. The journal was heavy, its pages yellowed with age. Poirot retreated to a quiet alcove, away from the music, and opened it. The first page bore the name Lord Percival Ravenwood and a date from 20 years prior. The entries were written in a meticulous hand, detailing the manor's construction and its many secrets. One passage caught his eye. "The Order of the Crescent guards the truth, hidden in plain sight. The cipher is the key, but only the worthy may find it." The word cipher was underlined twice, and beside it was a sketch of the same symbols from the coded note. Poirot's pulse quickened. The journal was a clue, perhaps the key to the entire mystery. But as he turned the page, a shadow fell across the alcove. He looked up to see the figure in the black velvet mask standing at the entrance, their eyes glinting through the slits. "You are meddling in dangerous affairs, monsieur," the figure said, their voice low and accented. Impossible to place. Before Poirot could respond, they vanished into the crowd. The encounter left him unshaken, but cautious. The journal was too valuable to leave unprotected. He slipped it into a hidden pocket in his coat, designed for just such purposes, and returned to the ballroom. The night was far from over, and the shadows held more secrets than he had anticipated. The coded note, the journal, the crescent moon seal all pointed to a treasure, yes, but also to a deeper conspiracy. The murder was merely the opening move in a game Poirot intended to win. As the clock struck 2, the guests began to disperse, their masks no longer concealing their fatigue and fear. Poirot lingered, his mind mapping the next steps. The journal mentioned a library where the first truth lies. Tomorrow, he would seek it out, decipher its secrets, and uncover the killer's motive. For now, he secured the journal in his room, locking the door and placing a hair across the threshold. To detect intruders, a trick he had used many times before. The ballroom was nearly empty now, its chandeliers dim, the shadows deeper. Poirot stood alone, his reflection caught in a gilded mirror. Hercule Poirot does not falter, he murmured to himself, adjusting his bow tie. The cipher will yield, and the truth will be revealed. With that, he retired to his room, the journals weighed a promise of answers to come. The night was still, but the manor was alive with whispers of secrets, of treasure, of death, and Poirot, with his little gray cells, was ready to listen. The library of Ravenwood Manor was a cavernous room, its walls lined with bookshelves that stretched to a vaulted ceiling. Dust motes danced in the slanting morning light, filtering through stained glass windows that depicted scenes of nights and crescents. Poirot had risen early, his sleep brief but restorative, and now stood before a towering oak desk, the journal open before him, the coded note, which he had persuaded Constable Harris to let him sketch, lay beside it, its symbols taunting him. The journal's entries were dense, filled with references to the Order of the Crescent and their obsession with a midnight cipher. Lord Ravenwood had been no mere eccentric, he was a scholar of the arcane, a man who believed in the power of hidden knowledge. One passage read, "The cipher is not one but 3, each a key to the next. The first lies in the heart of the manor, where shadows dance. The ballroom," Poirot deduced, was the heart, and the hidden panel had been the first step. But the journal hinted at more a physical cipher, perhaps, or a device hidden within the manor's walls. He turned to the coded note, its symbols a mix of geometric shapes and flourishes. Using a pencil, he began to test patterns, substituting letters and numbers, seeking a key. After an hour, he cracked a fragment, Librum Veritas, Latin for Book of Truth. The library, then, was the next stage. But which book? The shelves held thousands, from ancient tomes to modern novels, and time was not on his side. As he pondered, Lady Beatrice entered, her silver gown replaced by a demure morning dress, her peacock mask gone. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice hesitant, "I couldn't help but overhear you were seen with a journal last night. Is it connected to the tragedy?" Poirot smiled thinly. "Madam, all things are connected in a case such as this. But tell me, what brings you to the library so early? A thirst for knowledge, or something else?" Her cheeks flushed. I couldn't sleep. The murder. The whispers of treasure, it's all so unsettling." She paused, then added, "I knew Lord Ravenwood. You know, he was a friend of my father's. He spoke of secrets, but I never believed them until now." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Secrets, madam? Of what nature?" She hesitated, then said, "He mentioned a society, one that guarded something precious. I thought it was just talk. But that note, it's real, isn't it?" Poirot nodded, revealing nothing. Her story was plausible, but her nervousness suggested more. He thanked her and returned to the journal, his mind cataloging her words. As she left, he noticed a faint mark on the desk, a crescent moon etched into the wood. He pressed it, and a drawer sprang open, revealing a single sheet of parchment. It bore a riddle, "Where shadows fall at noon, the truth is bound in leather." Poirot glanced at the windows. Noon was hours away, but he could estimate where the light would fall. He paced the library, noting the shelves that would be bathed in sunlight. One section, near the eastern wall, held a collection of leather-bound volumes. Their spines faded, but intact. He ran his fingers along them, searching for a clue. One book, titled Ars Arcana, felt heavier than the others. He pulled it out, and a soft click echoed through the room. A panel in the shelf slid aside, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was another journal, smaller than the first, its pages filled with diagrams of the manor. A map, perhaps. Poirot's heart raced as he studied it. One diagram marked the greenhouse, with a note, "The key lies where roses bleed." The greenhouse, another piece of the puzzle. But as he closed the panel, he heard a creep behind him. Spinning around, he saw no one, but a book lay on the floor, as if knocked over. Someone had been watching. Poirot tucked the second journal into his coat and left the library, his senses alert. The manor was a maze of secrets, and the killer was still among them. The greenhouse would be his next stop. But first, he needed to secure the journals. The Order of the Crescent was closing in, and Hercule Poirot would not be caught unawares. The greenhouse was a glass-domed structure at the edge of the manor's gardens, its panes fogged with condensation. Roses climbed the iron trellises, their thorns glinting in the afternoon sun. Poirot entered cautiously, the second journal's riddle fresh in his mind. The key lies where roses bleed. The air was humid, heavy with the scent of earth and flowers. He examined the roses, searching for a clue. Near the center of the greenhouse, a crimson rose stood out, its petals streaked with an odd, dark stain. Blood, no. Ink, carefully applied to mimic a wound. He knelt, inspecting the plant's base. The soil was loose, recently disturbed. Digging carefully, he uncovered a small metal box, its surface etched with the crescent moon symbol. Inside was a brass key, its shaft engraved with the same symbols as the coded note, a triumph. But a fleeting 1 footsteps crunched on the gravel outside. Poirot slipped the key into his pocket and stood, just as a shadow passed the glass door. The door burst open, and a figure lunged at him, their face obscured by a hood. Poirot dodged, his agility surprising for his age, and the attacker stumbled, crashing into a trellis. Before Poirot could pursue, they fled, leaving behind a torn scrap of black velvet, the same fabric as the masked figure's cloak. Poirot's lips curled in a faint smile. The game was growing more dangerous, but also more revealing. He returned to the manor, the key a reassuring weight in his pocket, the journals, the key. The coded note all were pieces of the midnight cipher, a puzzle that promised not just treasure but truth. The killer had struck once, and they would strike again, unless Poirot was faster. As he climbed the grand staircase, he resolved to set a trap, using the key as bait. The scholar, Professor Elgin, was too eager, too knowledgeable. Perhaps it was time to test his loyalty. The day was fading, the manor's shadows lengthening. Hercule Poirot, with his meticulous mind and unyielding determination, was ready for the next move. The ballroom's secrets were only the beginning, and the truth was closer than ever. Chapter 3. The journal's riddled library of Ravenwood Manor was a cavernous sanctum of knowledge, its walls lined with towering oak shelves that groaned under the weight of countless leather-bound tomes. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood, and the faint crackle of the fireplace cast flickering shadows across the room. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, the dusty journal he had retrieved from the ballroom's hidden panel resting on a mahogany reading table. His gloved hands turned the brittle pages with care, his sharp eyes scanning the faded ink for clues to the mystery that had already claimed one life. The coded note found on the murdered guest lay beside the journal, its arcane symbols taunting him. The little gray cells, as he so fondly called them, were already at work, piecing together the puzzle of the midnight cipher. Poirot's mustache twitched as he adjusted his pince-nez, his posture impeccable despite the late hour. The manor's clock had struck 2 in the morning, and the masquerade ball's revelry had long since dissolved into uneasy whispers among the guests. The scream that had shattered the midnight air still lingered in his mind, as did the sight of the dead guest, a man named Sir Reginald Harrow, a minor noble with no apparent enemies, sprawled on the ballroom floor with the cryptic note clutched in his hand. The wax seal of a crescent moon on the invitation that had brought Poirot here now seemed less an eccentricity and more a harbinger of danger. He had resolved to stay, not merely to solve a murder but to unravel the deeper secret hinted at by the letter, a cipher that promised a dangerous truth. The journal, he deduced, was the key. Its cover bore the initials ER, presumably Lord Edward Ravenwood, the manor's late owner, whose death a year prior had been shrouded in rumors of foul play. The pages were filled with meticulous handwriting, interspersed with diagrams and cryptic annotations that suggested a mind obsessed with secrecy. Poirot's first task was to confirm the journal's authorship. He traced a finger over a passage describing the manor's history, noting references to a secret society known as the Order of the Crescent. The name sent a shiver through him, not from fear, but from the thrill of a challenge worthy of his intellect. Mon Dieu, he murmured. This Order of the Crescent, it is no mere fanciful club. It is a shadow that moves within shadows. The journal's early entries detailed Lord Ravenwood's fascination with ancient ciphers, particularly one he called the Midnight Cipher. According to the text, this artifact was no mere trinket, but a device of immense significance, capable of unlocking a vault hidden within the manor. The nature of the vault's contents remained vague. References to wealth beyond measure and power to reshape destinies were tantalizing but maddeningly unspecific. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. Such grandiose language often masked simpler truths, and he would uncover them in due time. He turned his attention to the coded note from the murder scene. Its symbols, spirals, cross lines, and crescent moons bore a striking resemblance to those in the journal. Poirot had encountered many ciphers in his career, from simple substitution codes to complex Polybius squares, but this one was unfamiliar. He began by cataloging the symbols, sketching them in his notebook with precise strokes. There were 12 distinct glyphs, repeated in varying patterns across the note's 3 lines. A substitution cipher seemed likely, but the lack of a clear alphabet or key made decryption challenging. He cross-referenced the symbols with the journal, finding a partial match in a diagram labeled the crescent's key. The diagram depicted a circular arrangement of symbols, each paired with a number from 1 to 12. Poirot hypothesized that the numbers corresponded to letters or words, but the journal offered no direct translation. Instead, it provided a clue. Seek the heart of the garden, where the moon's light falls. The phrase was poetic, but Poirot's practical mind interpreted it as a reference to a physical location. Within Ravenwood Manor's grounds, the manor's greenhouse, a glass-domed structure overgrown with vines, was a likely candidate. Its central atrium, open to the night sky, could be where the moon's light falls. Before leaving the library, Poirot examined the journal for additional clues. A folded page revealed a sketch of a brass key, its shaft etched with the same symbols as the coded note. The accompanying text read, "The key lies hidden where the roses weep." Another riddle, but one that reinforced his suspicion about the greenhouse, where rose bushes were known to thrive. He slipped the journal into his coat pocket, ensuring it was secure, and adjusted his cravat. The night was far from over, and the manor's secrets were only beginning to unfold. The greenhouse was a short walk from the manor's main hall, accessible through a stone archway draped in ivy. Poirot stepped into the chilly night air, his breath visible under the pale glow of the crescent moon. The manor's grounds were eerily silent, the revelry of the ball replaced by an oppressive stillness. He moved with purpose, his polished shoes clicking softly on the cobblestone path. The greenhouse loomed ahead, its glass panels reflecting the moonlight in fractured patterns. The door was unlocked, a detail that set Poirot's instincts on edge. Carelessness was unlikely in a place so steeped in secrecy. Inside, the air was humid and heavy with the scent of roses and damp earth. The central atrium was a circular space, its floor tiled in a mosaic of crescent moons. A stone fountain stood at the center, its basin filled with water that shimmered under the moonlight, streaming through the open roof. Poirot's eyes scanned the area, noting the rose bushes that lined the perimeter. "Where the roses weep," he repeated softly. Approaching the nearest bush, the petals were damp, likely from the fountain's mist, but a closer inspection revealed a hidden compartment in the stone wall behind the bush dot. With a gentle push, the compartment slid open, revealing a small brass key. Its surface was etched with the same symbols as the coded note and the journal sketch. Poirot held it up to the moonlight, admiring its craftsmanship. "C'est magnifique," he said, pocketing the key. But before he could examine the compartment further, a rustle in the shadows made him freeze. His hand instinctively went to his walking stick, which concealed a slender blade of precaution he rarely needed, but always carried. "Who is there?" he called, his voice calm, but commanding. No answer came, only the faint creak of glass underfoot. Poirot's eyes darted to the source. Catching a glimpse of a cloaked figure retreating into the darkness, he gave chase. Navigating the narrow paths between the rose bushes with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious demeanor. The figure was swift, slipping through a side door into the night. Poirot reached the door just as it slammed shut, the lock clicking into place. "Sacre bleu," he muttered, testing the handle. The figure had escaped, but not without leaving a trace. A torn scrap of black velvet lay on the ground, likely from the attacker's cloak. Poirot retrieved it, noting its fine quality. It matched the description of the mysterious figure in the black velvet mask he had observed in the ballroom. The connection was no coincidence, and Poirot's mind raced with possibilities. Was the attacker a guest, a member of the order, or both? Returning to the atrium, Poirot examined the compartment again. It contained nothing else, but the key was a significant find. He suspected it would unlock another piece of the puzzle, perhaps a lockbox or a hidden door within the manor. The journal's references to the midnight cipher suggested a multi-layered mystery, with each clue leading to the next. Poirot's task was to stay ahead of the killer, who was undoubtedly watching his every move. Back in the library, Poirot spread the coded note and the journal on the table. Placing the brass key beside them, the key's symbols matched those in the diagram, confirming its importance. He began to work on the cipher again, using the diagram's numbered sequence as a guide. After several minutes of trial and error, he deciphered the first line of the note. "The vault lies beneath." The second and third lines remained elusive, their symbols more complex. But the partial decryption was a breakthrough. The vault, presumably containing the midnight cipher, was somewhere below the manor cellar, perhaps, or a hidden chamber. Poirot leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrow was no random act. The coded note in his hand suggested he had been close to uncovering the vault's location, making him a threat to the Order of the Crescent. But who among the guests was a member of this secret society? The retired colonel, with his gruff demeanor and military precision, the glamorous heiress, Lady Beatrice, whose charm masked a sharp intellect, the nervous scholar, Professor Elgin, whose knowledge of ancient texts was suspiciously convenient, or the mysterious figure in the black velvet mask, whose identity remained elusive. The library's clock chimed 3, a reminder of the hour's lateness. Poirot's eyes lingered on the journal's final page, which contained a cryptic warning. "Trust no one, for the Crescent sees all." The words were a stark reminder of the danger he faced. The attacker in the greenhouse had been bold, perhaps desperate, suggesting the stakes were higher than Poirot had initially assumed. The midnight cipher was not merely a treasure, but a key to power, and someone was willing to kill to possess it. He closed the journal and stood, adjusting his coat. The key was safely in his pocket, but he knew it would attract attention. The attacker's escape meant the Order was aware of his progress, and they would not hesitate to strike again. Poirot's mind turned to the guests, each a potential ally or adversary. He would need to tread carefully, observing their behavior and testing their stories. The colonel's brusqueness, the heiress's poise, the scholar's unease each was a piece of the puzzle, and Poirot was determined to fit them together. As he left the library, the manor's silence was broken by a distant creak, as if the house itself were whispering its secrets. Poirot's lips curled into a determined smile. "The game, it is afoot," he said softly, stepping into the darkened hallway. The brass key weighed heavily in his pocket, a tangible link to the midnight cipher. He would protect it, decode the remaining ciphers, and unmask the killer. The Order of the Crescent may have watched from the shadows, but Hercule Poirot's little gray cells were a light they could not extinguish. The hallway led to the main staircase, its banisters gleaming under the chandelier's dim light. Poirot paused, considering his next move. The greenhouse attack had been a warning, but it had also revealed the enemy's desperation. The key was a prize they coveted, and Poirot would use it to draw them out. He resolved to return to his room, where he could study the journal and the coded note in private. The manor's many rooms and passages offered countless hiding places, but Poirot's mind was a map of its own, charting the path to the truth. In his room, a modest but elegant chamber on the second floor, Poirot locked the door and drew the curtains. He placed the journal, the coded note, and the key on a small desk, arranging them with precision. The journal's pages were a labyrinth of clues, and he began to catalog them systematically. Entries about the Order of the Crescent mentioned rituals held under the full moon, a detail that aligned with the manor's crescent moon motifs. The midnight cipher, it seemed, was tied to these rituals, perhaps as a ceremonial object or a key to their secrets. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. He tensed, his hand resting on the walking stick by his side. "Who is it?" he called, his voice steady. "Mr. Poirot, it's Lady Beatrice," came the reply, her tone laced with urgency. "I must speak with you." Poirot hesitated. Lady Beatrice, with her dazzling smile and impeccable manners, had been a prominent figure at the ball. Her connection to Lord Ravenwood, rumored to be more than platonic, made her a person of interest. Yet her request could not be ignored. He opened the door, revealing the heiress in a silk dressing gown, her mask discarded, but her eyes wary. "Madam, what brings you here at such an hour?" Poirot asked, gesturing for her to enter. She stepped inside, glancing nervously at the locked door. "I heard about the incident in the greenhouse," she said. "The guests are whispering." "Mr. Poirot, they say you found something, a key, perhaps." Poirot's expression remained impassive. "The guests, they talk much. Nests." Pause. "But what is it you wish to tell me?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I knew Sir Reginald. He was no ordinary noble. He was searching for something in this manor, something he believed would ruin the Ravenwood family. I think that's why he was killed." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you, madam, what do you know of this something?" She shook her head. "Only rumors. But I saw him speaking with Professor Elgin before the ball. They seemed secretive." "I thought you should know." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. "Merci, Lady Beatrice. Your candor is appreciated. But tell me, why come to me now, in the dead of night?" Her eyes flickered with fear. "Because I'm afraid, Mr. Poirot. This manor, this ball is Wade. There's something evil here, and I don't know who to trust." Poirot studied her, noting the tremble in her hands. Was she genuinely frightened, or was this a performance to deflect suspicion? "Return to your room, madam," he said gently. "Lock your door and rest. Hercule Poirot, he will ensure that justice is served." She nodded, offering a weak smile before leaving. Poirot locked the door behind her, his mind racing. Lady Beatrice's information about Sir Reginald and Professor Elgin was intriguing, but it could also be a misdirection. The professor's nervous demeanor at the ball had not escaped Poirot's notice, and his expertise in ancient texts made him a likely candidate for deciphering the midnight cipher. Poirot resolved to question him in the morning, subtly probing for inconsistencies. He returned to the desk, his focus on the coded note. The second line, he suspected, required the brass key symbols to unlock. He aligned the key with the diagram in the journal, noting that each symbol corresponded to a letter in a shifted alphabet. After an hour of meticulous work, he deciphered the second line. The path is hidden. The third line remains stubborn, its symbols defying his efforts. Frustrated but undeterred, Poirot leaned back, his mind turning to the greenhouse attack. The cloaked figure had been agile, suggesting youth or training. The scrap of black velvet was a clue, but a vague one-minute guess had worn similar fabrics at the ball. Poirot considered the possibility that the attacker was not a guest, but a member of the manor's staff, someone with intimate knowledge of its secrets. The butler, Mr. Grayson, had been conspicuously absent during the attack, a detail Poirot filed away for later scrutiny. As dawn approached, the manor remained cloaked in silence. Poirot's eyes grew heavy, but his mind refused to rest. The journal, the key, the coded note, they were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that connected the murder of Sir Reginald to the Order of the Crescent and the elusive midnight cipher. He closed the journal, securing it in a locked drawer, and placed the key in a hidden compartment in his walking stick. Safety was paramount, for the Order was watching, and their next move could be deadly. Poirot stood, stretching his limbs. The day ahead would bring new challenges, interviews with the guests, a closer examination of the manor's layout, and perhaps another attempt at the cipher's third line. He stepped to the window, parting the curtains to reveal the first light of dawn. The manor's grounds were bathed in a soft glow, the greenhouse a distant silhouette. Somewhere within these walls, the truth lay hidden, and Hercule Poirot would find it. He turned from the window, his resolve unshaken. The midnight cipher was more than a treasure. It was a key to a conspiracy that had already claimed one life and threatened more. The Order of the Crescent believed they could outwit him, but they underestimated the power of his little gray cells. With the brass key in his possession and the journal's secrets within his grasp, Poirot was one step closer to unmasking the killer and unraveling the mystery of Ravenwood Manor. The chapter closed with Poirot sitting at the desk, his notebook open to a fresh page. He began to sketch a timeline of the night's events, from the scream at midnight to the attack in the greenhouse. Each detail was a thread in the tapestry of the case, and he would weave them together with precision. The midnight cipher awaited, and with it, the truth. Hercule Poirot, the master of deduction, was ready for the challenge. Chapter 4. Whispers of betrayal. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Ravenwood Manor, casting long, wavering shadows across the polished oak floors of the grand dining hall. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his small, meticulous hands folded neatly before him, his mustache perfectly waxed despite the early hour. His sharp, green eyes surveyed the room, taking in the eclectic assembly of guests who had gathered for breakfast, their faces a mixture of fatigue, suspicion, and barely concealed unease. The events of the previous night, the scream, the body, the cryptic note clutched in the dead man's hand had left an indelible mark on the atmosphere. The air was thick with tension, as if the very walls of the manor whispered secrets too, dangerous to be spoken aloud. Poirot's mind, however, was a fortress of calm. His little gray cells, as he so fondly called them, were already at work, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle that had begun to form. Since his arrival at this enigmatic masquerade ball, the coded note found on the body had been a tantalizing clue, its arcane symbols hinting at a treasure hidden within the manor's ancient walls. His partial deciphering had led him to the ballroom's hidden panel, where he had secured the dusty journal, a relic of Lord Ravenwood's past that spoke of a secret society and a mythical artifact known as the Midnight Cipher. Now, with a new day dawning, Poirot was determined to press forward. to unravel the threads of deceit that bound the guests together. The dining hall was a study in opulence, its high ceilings adorned with intricate frescoes of celestial scenes, the walls lined with portraits of stern-faced Ravenwood ancestors, whose eyes seemed to follow every movement. The table was laden with silver trays of scones, jams, and steaming pots of tea. Yet few of the guests had much appetite. Lady Beatrice, the glamorous heiress, sat to Poirot's left, her emerald green dress shimmering in the morning light. She toyed with a silver teaspoon, her delicate fingers betraying a faint tremor. Across from her, Professor Elgin, the nervous scholar, adjusted his spectacles repeatedly, his eyes darting to the exits as if expecting an ambush. The retired Colonel Warwick, his military bearing still evident despite his age, sat ramrod straight, his fork stabbing at a piece of toast with unnecessary force. And at the far end of the table, the mysterious figure in the black velvet mask whose identity remained maddeningly elusive sipped coffee in silence, their presence a constant enigma. Poirot cleared his throat, a small, deliberate sound that commanded immediate attention. "Zamis," he began, his Belgian accent crisp and measured. "The events of last night have cast a shadow over this gathering. A man is dead, and a cipher, most curious, has been found in his possession. I, Hercule Poirot, have resolved to uncover the truth not only of this murder, but of the secrets that this manor holds. I ask for your cooperation, for it is only through the truth that we may find justice." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Lady Beatrice's lips parted, as if to speak, but she thought better of it, her eyes dropping to the table. Professor Elgin pushed his spectacles up his nose, his voice trembling slightly as he said, "Monsieur Poirot, surely this is a matter for the police. We are but guests here, caught in unfortunate circumstances." Poirot's smile was polite, but unyielding. "The police, mon cher professor, have their methods, but they lack the finesse of Hercule Poirot. Besides, the snowstorm that rages outside has made the roads impassable. We are, for the moment, a closed circle, and within this circle lies the truth." Colonel Warwick snorted, his mustache bristling. "Closed circle or not, I've seen my share of intrigue in the army. This business reeks of conspiracy. The coded note damn peculiar, if you ask me. What's it all about, Poirot?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "A question most astute, Colonel. The note, as I have begun to decipher, points to a treasure hidden within Ravenwood Manor. But it is not merely gold or jewels that we seek, it is knowledge, perhaps power, that this cipher protects. I intend to find it." The figure in the black velvet mask shifted slightly, their gloved hand tightening around their coffee cup. Poirot noted the movement, his mind cataloging every detail. There was something about this figure, something in their silence, their poise, that suggested they knew more than they let on. But for now, Poirot turned his attention to the others, determined to probe their stories. "Lady Beatrice," he said, his tone gentle but probing, "you mentioned last night that you were acquainted with the late Lord Ravenwood. Perhaps you could share more about this connection? It may shed light on the events that have transpired." Lady Beatrice's cheeks flushed slightly, and she set down her teaspoon with a faint clink. "It was a long time ago, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Lord Ravenwood was a friend of my father's. They shared an interest in antiquities, rare books, artifacts, that sort of thing. I visited the manor as a child, but I haven't been back in years. Not until this invitation arrived." Poirot tilted his head, his expression one of polite curiosity. "And this invitation, it was signed with the crescent moon. Did it stir any memories of your time here?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering to the portrait of Lord Ravenwood above the fireplace. "It was unusual. I thought it might be a jest at first, but the seal, it reminded me of stories my father told about a society Lord Ravenwood was part of, something secretive, exclusive. I never knew the details." Poirot nodded, his mind noting the slight quiver in her voice. A half-truth, perhaps. He turned to Professor Elgin. And you, Professor, you are a scholar of ancient languages, are you not? Surely a man of your expertise would find such a cipher intriguing. Elgin's hand shook as he reached for his. I study ciphers as a hobby, yes, but this one, it's unlike anything I've seen. The symbols are a mix of ancient scripts, perhaps runic, perhaps alchemical. I'd need more time to make sense of it. Poirot's smile was almost imperceptible. Time, Professor, is a luxury we may not have, but I shall keep your expertise in mind. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the dining hall door. The butler, Mr. Harrow, entered, his face pale and drawn. "Pardon the intrusion, sir," he said, addressing Poirot. "A letter was found slipped under your door this morning. I thought you should have it at once." Poirot's eyebrows rose as he took the envelope, its wax seal bearing the now familiar crescent moon. He opened it with care, revealing a second, coded note, its symbols even more intricate than the first. The guests leaned forward, their curiosity piqued despite their unease. "Another cipher," Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning the page. "Most intriguing. This one, I believe, will lead us closer to the heart of the mystery." He excused himself from the table, retreating to his room to study the note in private. The symbols were indeed complex, a labyrinth of lines and curves that seemed to dance across the page. But Poirot's mind was a machine of precision, and within an hour, he had deciphered enough to uncover a single phrase: "The tower strikes." At midnight, the clock tower. It was an obvious lead, yet one that filled Poirot with a sense of foreboding. Ravenwood Manor's clock tower was a looming structure at the edge of the estate, its ancient mechanism still ticking with eerie precision. If the cipher pointed there, it was no coincidence. Poirot donned his overcoat and made his way to the tower, his steps echoing in the silent corridors. The manor was a maze of passages and staircases, its architecture a blend of Gothic splendor and labyrinthine complexity. As he climbed the spiral stairs to the tower, the air grew colder, the scent of dust and age heavy in his nostrils. At the top, he found a small, circular room, its walls lined with gears and levers. In the center stood a mechanical puzzle box, its surface etched with the same symbols as the brass key he had found in the greenhouse. Poirot's heart quickened. This was no ordinary puzzle. The box was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, its dials and slots designed to accept the brass key with careful precision. He inserted the key and turned it, the mechanism clicking into place. A hidden compartment sprang open, revealing a fragment of a map parchment yellowed with age, its edges marked with cryptic notations. The map showed a portion of the manor's grounds, with an X marking a spot near the wine cellar. Poirot pocketed the map fragment, his mind racing. The cipher, the journal, the key, and now this map. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that pointed to a secret hidden deep within the manor. But as he turned to leave, he caught a flicker of movement in the shadows below. Someone had been watching him. He descended the stairs cautiously, his hand resting on the small revolver he carried for emergencies. The figure was gone, but the sense of being observed lingered. Back in the manor, Poirot sought out Professor Elgin, whose nervous demeanor had not escaped his notice. The scholar was in the library, poring over a stack of books on ancient scripts. "Professor," Poirot said, his tone deceptively casual, "you have been most helpful in describing the cipher's complexity, but I wonder if you have seen something like this before." He held up the map fragment. Watching Elgin's reaction closely, the professor's eyes widened, and his hands trembled as he reached for the parchment. This is extraordinary," he stammered. "It resembles maps used by secret societies in the 18th century. The symbols, they're part of a cipher system used to protect treasures." Poirot's gaze sharpened, "And you recognized it immediately. Yet you did not mention such knowledge earlier." Elgin paled, his spectacles slipping down his nose. I didn't think it relevant. I study many things, Monsieur Poirot. It's difficult to recall every detail. Poirot's smile was cold. The mind of Hercule Poirot, Professor, forgets nothing, and it is most curious that you, a scholar of ciphers, would overlook such a detail. He left Elgin in the library, his suspicions confirmed. The professor was hiding something, perhaps a connection to the Order of the Crescent, perhaps something more personal. To test his theory, Poirot devised a subtle trap. He let it be known among the guests that he would leave the map fragment in his room, unguarded, while he joined them for dinner. In truth, he hid the fragment elsewhere, placing a decoy in its place that evening. As the guests dined, Poirot excused himself briefly, returning to his room to find the decoy gone. A quick search of the manor led him to Professor Elgin's quarters, where he found the scholar frantically examining the false map, caught red-handed. Elgin's composure crumbled. "Monsieur Poirot, I can explain," he cried, his voice shrill. "I only wanted to study it to understand its significance." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Professor, you did not ask my permission. You took what was not yours. Tell me, what is your true interest in this map?" Under Poirot's relentless gaze, Elgin's resistance faltered. I am a member of the Order of the Crescent," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "But I swear, I meant no harm. The Order seeks the midnight cipher not for wealth, but for power. It's set to unlock a vault, a fortune that could control empires. I was sent to find it, but I didn't kill anyone." Poirot's expression remained impassive. "A confession, Professor, is a start. But the truth, it is like a fine wine, it must be savored slowly. You will remain under my watch." As Poirot escorted Elgin back to the dining hall, a sudden blackout plunged the manor into darkness. Gasps and shouts filled the air, followed by a heavy thud. When the lights flickered back on, Colonel Warwick lay slumped on the floor, unconscious. A fresh cipher note clutched in his hand. Poirot knelt beside him, his fingers deftly retrieving the note. Its symbols were familiar, yet darker, more urgent. As he studied it, his little gray cells worked furiously, deciphering a new clue. The cellar hides the path, the wine cellar. Another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Poirot rallied a small group, Lady Beatrice, the butler, and a reluctant Elgin to accompany him to the cellar. The colonel, revived but shaken, insisted on staying behind, claiming a headache. Poirot noted his pallor, but said nothing, his mind already focused on the task ahead. The wine cellar was a cavernous space, its walls lined with racks of dusty bottles, the air thick with the scent of oak and earth. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the room, searching for anything out of place. At the far end, behind a rack of Bordeaux, he found a stone wall with a faint crescent moon carved into its surface. Pressing it, he heard a low grinding sound as the wall slid aside, revealing a secret passage descending into darkness. Poirot turned to his companions, his voice steady. "Zamis, the truth lies below, but it is a truth we must face together. Follow me, and stay close." As they descended into the unknown, Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities. The Order of the Crescent, the midnight cipher, the map. Fragments all were converging toward a single point. But the shadow of betrayal loomed large, and Poirot knew that the next step would bring him closer to the heart of the mystery, or to a danger he could not yet foresee. The passage was narrow, its walls damp and cold, the air heavy with the weight of centuries. Poirot's lantern cast flickering shadows, revealing ancient stonework etched with faint symbols. Lady Beatrice clung to his arm, her breath uneven, while Elgin muttered nervously about archaeological significance. The butler, silent and watchful, brought up the rear, his presence a quiet reassurance. At the end of the passage, they found a heavy iron door, its surface marked with a slot for the brass key. Poirot inserted it, turning it with a satisfying click. The door creaked open, revealing a chamber unlike any they had seen. Its walls were adorned with crescent moon motifs, their silver surfaces glinting in the lantern light. In the center stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested an ancient tome, its leather cover embossed with the same symbols as the cipher notes. Poirot approached the tome, his fingers tracing its edges. "This," he said softly, "is the key to the midnight cipher. But it is not the end of our journey, only the beginning." As he opened the tome, a gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the lantern. In the darkness, a low chuckle echoed, chilling Poirot to the bone. Someone or something was watching, waiting. The game, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 5. The clock tower's secret. Hercule Poirot adjusted his bow tie, the crisp black fabric a stark contrast to the gleaming white shirt that adorned his meticulous frame. The air in Ravenwood Manor was thick with suspicion, the kind of atmosphere that clung to the ornate wallpaper and seeped into the polished mahogany floors. The grand masquerade ball, now a distant memory from tonight's prior, had given way to a grim investigation. The death of a guest, a cryptic note clutched in their lifeless hand, and the whispers of a secret society known as the Order of the Crescent had drawn Poirot into a labyrinth of deception. His little gray cells, as he so fondly called them, hummed with purpose. The morning after his discovery in the library, Poirot stood in the Manor's great hall, his sharp eyes scanning the gathered guests. The eclectic assembly: Lady Beatrice, the glamorous heiress with her emerald gown; Colonel Warwick, retired and stern, his medals glinting faintly in the chandelier's light; Professor Elgin, the nervous scholar whose spectacles seemed perpetually fogged; and a host of others cloaked in their own secrets watched him with a mix of curiosity and unease. The coded note found on the body, its arcane symbols partially deciphered, had led Poirot to a dusty journal hidden in a ballroom panel. The journal, penned by the late Lord Ravenwood, spoke of a mythical artifact, the midnight cipher, and hinted at a treasure buried within the manor's ancient walls. Now, a new clue: a second coded note slipped under Poirot's door, and the dead of night pointed to the clock K tower. Poirot's plan was precise: expose the traitor among them. He had set a subtle trap for Professor Elgin, whose fidgety demeanor and expertise in ancient ciphers made him a prime suspect. The note, with its cryptic symbols, had directed Poirot to the clock tower, and he was certain Elgin's reaction would betray his intentions. As the guests dispersed for breakfast, Poirot slipped away, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rugs, and made his way to the tower. The clock tower loomed at the manor's northern end, a Gothic spire piercing the overcast sky. Its iron hands, frozen at 10 minutes to midnight, seemed to mock the urgency of the moment. Poirot ascended the spiral staircase, each step creaking under his weight, the air growing colder as he climbed. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through narrow windows, and the faint tick of gears echoed above. At the top, he found the clock's inner workings, a maze of brass cogs and pendulums, their rhythmic clatter a stark contrast to the manor's oppressive silence. In the center of the platform stood a mechanical puzzle box, its surface etched with crescent moon symbols that matched the wax seal on the original invitation. The box, no larger than a cigar case, gleamed faintly in the dim light, its intricate dials and levers suggesting a lock of extraordinary complexity. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. A challenge worthy of Hercule Poirot. He retrieved the brass key from his pocket, the one he had found in the greenhouse the previous night, its surface etched with symbols that mirrored those on the box. With a delicate touch, he inserted the key into a slot on the box's side, turning it slowly. A soft click echoed, and the box sprang open, revealing a folded parchment, a fragment of a map. Its edges frayed, but its ink vivid. The map depicted a section of the manor, with an X mark near what appeared to be the wine cellar. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The plot, it thickens," he said softly, tucking the map into his waistcoat. But his triumph was short-lived. A shadow flickered in the corner of his vision, and Poirot spawned just in time to see Professor Elgin, his face pale and his hands trembling, standing at the top of the stairs. "Monsieur Elgin," Poirot said, his voice calm but laced with steel, "you have followed me. None. Perhaps you wish to explain why you are so eager to see this map." Elgin's eyes darted to the puzzle box, then back to Poirot. I was merely curious, Monsieur Poirot," he stammered, adjusting his spectacles. "As a scholar of ciphers, I thought I might assist." "Assist?" Poirot interrupted, his mustache twitching. "Or perhaps to steal what does not belong to you." He stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "Last night, I placed a small mark on this very box, a mark visible only under the light of my pocket torch. And yet, I see fingerprints, fresh and clear, that are not my own. Yours, perhaps." Elgin's face drained of color. "You set a trap," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the ticking gears. Poirot said, his tone almost pitying. "And you, mon ami, have walked into it." Under Poirot's relentless questioning, Elgin crumbled. He confessed to being a member of the Order of the Crescent, a secret society obsessed with the midnight cipher, which he claimed was a device capable of unlocking a hidden fortune amassed by Lord Ravenwood. "The Order has waited decades," Elgin said, his voice trembling. "The cipher is the key to everything: wealth, power, control. I was tasked to retrieve the map fragment before you could." "And the murder?" Poirot pressed, his eyes narrowing. "The guest who died, clutching a coded note, was that your doing." "No," Elgin cried, his hands raised in protest. "I swear, I only sought the cipher. The murder, that was someone else. Someone higher in the Order." Poirot's mind raced, cataloging every detail. Elgin's confession confirmed the Order's existence, but it also suggested a larger conspiracy, a mastermind still hidden among the guests. Before he could press further, the tower plunged into darkness, the lights flickered and died, and a heavy thud echoed from below. Poirot grabbed his torch, its beam cutting through the gloom, and descended the stairs with Elgin in tow. At the base of the tower, they found Colonel Warwick slumped against the wall, unconscious. A fresh gash on his temple. In his hand was another coded note, its symbols eerily similar to the first. Poirot's heart quickened. "Another piece of the puzzle," he murmured, slipping the note into his pocket. He turned to Elgin, who looked ashen. "You will stay where I can see you, monsieur. This game is far from over." With the manor in chaos, guests shouting, servants rushing to aid the colonel, Poirot retreated to a quiet corner of the library to study the new note. Its symbols, though complex, followed a pattern he had begun to recognize. After an hour of meticulous work, his pencil scratching across a notepad, he deciphered the message. The path lies beneath. The vines, the wine cellar, he realized, was the next destination. But the manor was no longer a safe haven. The blackout, the attack on the colonel, and Elgin's betrayal pointed to a desperate adversary, one who knew Poirot was closing in. He gathered a small group he deemed trustworthy. Miss Clara, a quiet governess who had remained composed throughout the ordeal. Mr. Hargrove, a solicitor with a keen eye for detail. And, reluctantly, Lady Beatrice, whose knowledge of the manor's history might prove useful. Despite Poirot's growing suspicions about her, the wine cellar was accessed through a heavy oak door. In the manor's basement, its hinges groaning as Poirot pushed it open. The air was cool and damp, the scent of aged oak and fermenting grapes heavy in the gloom. Rows of dusty bottles lined the walls, their labels faded but elegant, a testament to Ravenwood's wealth. Poirot's torch swept across the room, landing on a stone wall at the far end, its surface etched with a faint crescent moon. "There," he said, pointing. "The path lies beneath." Hargrove, ever practical, tapped the wall, his knuckles producing a hollow sound. "A false panel," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. Together, they pressed against the stone, and it gave way, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Poirot's pulse quickened. The midnight cipher was closer than ever. But so was the danger. The group moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the cramped tunnel. Cobwebs clung to the walls, and the air grew colder with each step. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the clues, the journal, the key, the map fragments. The Order's obsession. The cipher, he suspected, was more than a key to wealth. It was a symbol of power. A secret that someone was willing to kill for. As they reached the passage's end, a faint glow illuminated a heavy iron door, its surface engraved with the same crescent moon symbol. Poirot's fingers traced the etching, his mind racing. "This is it," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "The next step in our journey." But before he could proceed, a soft rustle behind them made him freeze. He turned, his torch catching the glint of a blade in the shadows. "Monsieur, madame," he said calmly, his eyes never leaving the darkness. "It seems we are not alone." The group huddled closer, their breaths shallow. Poirot's mind worked furiously, calculating their next move. The midnight cipher was within reach, but the Order or its mastermind was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He tightened his grip on the torch, his resolve unshaken. "Onward," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Hercule Poirot does not retreat. The passage led them deeper, the air growing heavier, the walls closing in, every sound a drip of water. A scuff of a shoe set their nerves on edge. Poirot's torch illuminated faint carvings on the walls, symbols that matched those in the journal, telling a story of the Order's origins. The crescent, it seemed, was not just a symbol but a creed, a pact forged centuries ago to protect a secret so potent it could reshape empires. Lady Beatrice, her face pale but composed, whispered, "Lord Ravenwood was obsessed with the Order. He believed the cipher held the key to their downfall." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And someone wishes to keep the key buried. But who, madam? Who among us plays the double game?" She met his gaze, her lips parting as if to speak, but a low rumble interrupted her. The ground trembled, and dust rained from the ceiling. "A trap!" Hargrove shouted, pulling Clara back as a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden mechanism. Poirot's quick thinking took over. He lunged forward, jamming the brass key into a slot in the mechanism, halting its movement just as a cascade of stones began to fall. The group exhaled in relief, but Poirot's expression remained grim. "We are close," he said, "but the Order is closer still. We must proceed with utmost caution." The iron door loomed ahead, its crescent moon symbol a silent challenge. Poirot inserted the key, its symbols aligning perfectly with the lock. With a groan, the door swung open, revealing a stone staircase descending into an abyss. The air was thick with the scent of earth and secrets, and Poirot's heart raced with anticipation. As they descended, the walls widened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a pedestal, and atop it, a crystalline device glinted. Faintly the midnight cipher. Its surface was etched with symbols, each one pulsing with an almost otherworldly light. Poirot approached, his fingers hovering over the device. But he paused, his instincts screaming caution. "This is no mere treasure," he said, his voice low. "This is knowledge, power, a weapon. And someone in this manor will stop at nothing to possess it." Clara gasped, pointing to the shadows. A figure emerged, cloaked in black, the same velvet mask Poirot had glimpsed in the ballroom. The figure's voice was low, menacing. "You've come far, Poirot, but you'll go no further." Poirot's lips curled into a smile. "Au contraire," he said, his voice steady. "Hercule Poirot always finishes what he begins." The figure lunged, but Poirot was ready. He sidestepped, using the torch to blind his attacker, and the group sprang into action. Hargrove tackled the figure, pinning them to the ground, while Clara snatched the mask away, revealing a face that made Lady Beatrice cry out in shock. "Impossible," she whispered, her hands trembling. Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Not impossible, madam, merely improbable. And now, we shall see the truth." The chamber fell silent, the cipher's light casting eerie shadows across the walls. The unmasked figure glared at Poirot, their identity a revelation that would shake the manor to its core. But Poirot's work was not done. The cipher, the order, the murders all were threads in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. As the group secured the figure, Poirot turned back to the cipher, his mind racing. The map fragments, the journal, the notes, they all pointed to this moment. But the final piece of the puzzle remained elusive. Who was the true mastermind? And what was the cipher's ultimate secret with the chamber secure? Poirot led the group back to the wine cellar, the cipher carefully wrapped in his handkerchief. The manor was alive with chaos, guests demanding answers, servants whispering of ghosts, but Poirot remained focused. He knew the order's leader was still at large, and the night was far from over. In the library, he spread the map fragments on a table, their edges aligning to form a complete picture. The vault, he realized, lay beneath the manor's chapel, a place no one had thought to search. But the cipher's true power was not wealth, it was a ledger, a record of the order's crimes, encoded in its crystalline structure. To unlock it, Poirot would need all his cunning. As the group prepared to move to the chapel, Poirot's eyes fell on Lady Beatrice, her story, her connection to Ravenwood, her brother's supposed death. There were too many inconsistencies. "Madam," he said softly, "there is something you are not telling me, and before this night is over, you will." She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You're wrong, Monsieur Poirot," she said, but her voice wavered. Poirot smiled faintly. "We shall see." The chapter closed with the group heading toward the chapel, the cipher in Poirot's possession, the weight of the mystery heavier than ever. The clock tower's secret had been revealed, but the manor held more secrets that would test Poirot's brilliance and courage to their limits. Chapter 6. Beneath the manor there in the wine cellar was cool and damp, heavy with a musty scent of aged oak and fermenting grapes. Hercule Poirot descended the narrow stone steps, his polished shoes tapping softly against the worn treads. Behind him followed a small, uneasy group, Captain Hastings, ever loyal, but visibly apprehensive. Lady Beatrice, her elegant poise strained by the night's revelations, and Dr. Harold Merton, a quiet physician among the guests, whose steady demeanor Poirot had come to trust. The flickering light of a single lantern, held aloft by Hastings, cast long shadows that danced across the rows of dusty bottles lining the walls. Poirot's mind was a whirl of precision, his little gray cells sifting through the clues accumulated. Thus far, the coded notes, the brass key, the journal's cryptic references to the Order of the Crescent, and now the secret passage hinted at by the latest cipher. The note, found beside the unconscious Colonel Warwick, had been a masterpiece of obfuscation symbols interwoven with numbers, a puzzle that had taken Poirot nearly an hour to crack in the dim light of the clock tower. Its message, once deciphered, was clear. The truth lies beneath, where the vine guards the crescent. The wine cellar, with its ancient stonework and rumors of hidden chambers, was the obvious destination. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings, "hold the lantern higher, if you please. We must see clearly what lies ahead." Hastings complied, his face pale but resolute. "This place gives me the creeps, Poirot. All these bottles, and who knows what else hidden down here. Feels like we're walking into a trap, perhaps." "Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice calm, but his eyes sharp, scanning the shadows. "But a trap. It is only dangerous if one does not expect it, and Hercule Poirot, he is always prepared." Lady Beatrice, her silk gown brushing against the stone floor, spoke up, her voice tinged with unease. "Monsieur Poirot, are you certain this passage exists? The manor is ancient, but secret tunnels seem rather theatrical." Poirot's mustache twitched slightly, a sign of amusement. "Theatrical, madam? Perhaps. But the Order of the Crescent, they are nothing if not dramatic. Their secrets, they are hidden not in plain sight, but in the places where no one thinks to look. The cellar, it is perfect for such concealment." Dr. Merton, trailing at the rear, adjusted his spectacles. "I've heard tales of old estates like this," he said quietly. "Passages built for smuggling, or hiding priests during the Reformation. If Lord Ravenwood was part of this order, it's plausible he'd have such a place." "Exactament," Poirot said, pausing to examine a row of wine racks. His fingers traced the edges of the wooden shelves, searching for irregularities. "And if the order guards the midnight cipher, as the journal suggests, then this passage, it will lead us to their heart." The group moved deeper into the cellar, the air growing colder, the silence broken only by the occasional drip of water from the vaulted ceiling. Poirot's keen eyes darted from one detail to another. A scuff mark on the floor, a bottle slightly askew, a faint draft where none should be. He stopped abruptly before a stone wall at the cellar's far end, its surface unremarkable save for a faint carving of crescent moon, barely visible in the lantern's glow. "Here," Poirot said, his voice low but firm. "This is the place." He pressed his hand against the carving, feeling for any give in the stone. Nothing. Undeterred, he stepped back, studying the wall with the intensity of a chess master contemplating a critical move. "The cipher spoke of the vine," he murmured. "And here, we are surrounded by the fruits of the vine, yet the crescent guides us." Hastings, ever practical, gestured to the wine racks. "Could it be one of these, a hidden lever?" "Perhaps," Poirot nodded. "A possibility, mon ami. Let us examine." The group set to work, inspecting the racks with care. Lady Beatrice, despite her earlier skepticism, joined in, her delicate fingers probing the wooden frames. Dr. Merton checked the bottles themselves, tapping them gently to listen for hollow sounds. It was Poirot, however, who noticed the anomaly. A single bottle, labeled with a vintage dated 1693, far older than the others. Its position was slightly off, tilted as if not fully settled in its slot. "Curio," Poirot muttered. He grasped the bottle and pulled. It resisted at first, then slid forward with a soft click. A low rumble echoed through the cellar, and a section of the stone wall began to shift, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. "Good Lord!" Hastings exclaimed, nearly dropping the lantern. "You've done it, Poirot." "Not I, Hastings," Poirot said, his tone measured. "The order. They have done it. We merely follow their path." The passage was cramped, its walls rough-hewn and slick with moisture. Poirot led the way, his small frame moving with surprising agility. The lantern's light revealed faint carvings along the walls, more crescent moons, interspersed with symbols matching those in the coded notes. The air grew heavier, carrying a faint metallic tang, as if the earth itself held secrets long buried. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only minutes, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber. The lantern's glow was swallowed by the space, illuminating only fragments of what lay within. Stone pillars etched with intricate designs, a dome ceiling adorned with a mosaic of a crescent moon, and at the chamber's center, a raised platform, holding a single object, an ancient tome, its leather cover cracked with age. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, stepping forward. "This, Mzamis, is no ordinary book." As he approached the platform, the others followed, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The tome was massive, its pages yellowed and brittle, secured by a heavy clasp engraved with the same crescent symbol. Poirot's fingers hovered over it, hesitant for the first time. "This is the heart of the Order's secrets," he said. "The Midnight Cipher. It is not merely a device, but a recorded key to power." Lady Beatrice's voice trembled slightly. "What kind of power, Monsieur Poirot? Wealth? Influence?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the lantern light. "Perhaps both, madam. Or perhaps something more dangerous: knowledge. The knowledge to control, to destroy, to remake. We shall see." He opened the clasp, the sound sharpened the silence. The pages were filled with dense text, written in a script that blended Latin, Greek, and symbols Poirot recognized from the coded notes. Interspersed were diagrams of a crystalline device, its facets etched with the same symbols. "The midnight cipher," Poirot said, tracing a finger over the drawing. "It is not a myth. It exists. And it is here, somewhere in this manor." Before he could read further, a low grinding noise filled the chamber. The group spun around, the lantern casting wild shadows. A section of the floor near the entrance shifted, revealing a hidden mechanism, a trap armed with a series of sharp blades that sprang upward, blocking their path back. Hastings cursed under his breath. "A booby trap. We're stuck. Calm yourself, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice steady. "The order. They protect their secrets. But Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily defeated." He examined the trap, noting the gears visible beneath. "The blades. A mechanical device," he said. "Clever, but not infallible." Turning to Dr. Merton, he asked, "Monsieur, you have knowledge of machines. Can you assist?" Merton nodded, kneeling to inspect the mechanism. "It's complex, but I think I can disable it. We'll need something to jam the gears, something sturdy." Lady Beatrice, ever resourceful, produced a metal hairpin from her elaborate updo. "Will this do?" Merton took it, his hand steady despite the danger. With Poirot's guidance, he inserted the pin into a gap in the gears, twisting carefully. The blade shuddered, then retracted with a groan, leaving the passage clear. "Bravo, Doctor," Poirot said, clapping him on the shoulder. "But we must hurry. The trap. It suggests we are not alone in our pursuit." As they returned to the tome, Poirot's sharp eyes caught a detail in the text, a reference to a traitor within the order. "One who wears the crescent but serves another." He read aloud. "This Zamis complicates matters. There is a betrayer among us, or among the guests above." Lady Beatrice's face paled, and Poirot noted it, his mind racing. Her earlier confession, partial and vague, had hinted at protecting someone. Was she the traitor, or merely a pawn? Her connection to Lord Ravenwood, revealed in Chapter 4, was scandalous, a rumored affair, perhaps more, yet her fears seemed genuine, her hands trembling as she clutched her shawl. "Madam," Poirot said gently, "you have something to tell me. The time for secrets, it is past." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the shadows. I cannot say, Monsieur." "Poirot, not yet. I swear I mean you no harm. But there are things I must protect." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well. But know this, the truth. It will come to light. It always does." He closed the tome, tucking it under his arm. "We return to the manor. This book, it holds the key to the cipher, but also to the traitor's identity. We must be vigilant." The journey back through the passage was tense, each creak of the stone walls amplifying their nerves. As they emerged into the wine cellar, the familiar scent of oak was a relief. But Poirot's mind was far from eased. The trap, the tome, the traitor all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than he had anticipated. The midnight cipher was no mere treasure. It was a weapon, and the order or someone within it would kill to possess it. Back in the manor's main hall, the remaining guests were gathered, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. The colonel, now recovered but shaken, sat by the fire, while Professor Elgin, exposed as an order member, was under watch by de Burley. Footman, the mysterious figure in the black velvet mask, had vanished, and Poirot's trap for the professor had yielded only partial answers. The butler, too, remained a question mark, his loyalty uncertain despite his protests. Poirot set the tome on a table, its presence drawing gasps from the guests. "Mesdames et messieurs," he announced, "we have uncovered a piece of the puzzle. But the danger, it grows. The midnight cipher, it is real, and it is close. But there is one among us who seeks to betray us all." The room erupted in murmurs, eyes darting from one face to another. Lady Beatrice shrank back, her expression unreadable. Dr. Merton adjusted his spectacles, his calm facade unwavering. Hastings, loyal as ever, stood by Poirot's side, ready for whatever came next. As the clock struck 1 in the morning, Poirot's gaze swept the room. His little gray cells working furiously. The traitor, the cipher, the masked figure, they were all connected, and he would unravel the threads. The chapter closed with Poirot vowing to confront Lady Beatrice again. Her partial confessional loose end he could not ignore. The manor, with its secrets and shadows, seemed to pulse with anticipation, waiting for the next move in this deadly game. The underground chamber, now a vivid memory, lingered in Poirot's thoughts as he ascended to the manor's upper floors. The tome, heavy under his arm, was a tangible link to the Order's past, but its secrets were far from fully revealed. He directed Hastings to secure it in his room, under lock and key. While he prepared for the next phase of his investigation, Lady Beatrice, he decided, would be his focus. Her hesitation in the chamber, her vague allusions to protecting someone, suggested she knew more than she admitted. Was she shielding a lover, a family member, or perhaps herself? Poirot's method was to observe, to probe, to let the guilty reveal themselves through their own inconsistencies. He would speak with her alone, away from the prying eyes of the other guests. The manor's corridors were dimly lit, the hour late, and the guests had retired to their rooms under the pretense of safety. Poirot, however, knew that safety was an illusion until the cipher was secured and the traitor unmasked. He knocked softly on Lady Beatrice's door, his demeanor polite but firm. "Madam, a word, if you please." She opened the door, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot, it is late. Can this not wait?" "No, madam," he said, stepping inside. "The hour. It is late, but the truth, it does not sleep," she sighed, gesturing to a chair. "Very well. What do you wish to know?" Poirot sat, his eyes never leaving her face. "You spoke of protecting someone. Who, madam, and why?" "The midnight cipher. It is a dangerous prize, and those who seek it, they do not hesitate to kill." Her hands twisted in her lap, a telltale sign of nerves. I cannot name him. Not yet. But I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I am no traitor. I love Lord Ravenwood, yes, but I had no part in his schemes. The Order, they threatened me, forced me to play a role. I only wished to keep someone safe, someone," Poirot repeated, his tone gentle but probing. "A brother, perhaps, a lover." "Madam, the truth. It is your only ally now." Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her features. "You know?" "I know only what you do not say," Poirot replied. "But I will find out, madam, and when I do, it will be better for you if you have spoken first." She rose, pacing the room. "You don't understand the danger, Monsieur Poirot. The Order, they are everywhere, even here, in this manor. If I speak, he will die." "Then trust Hercule Poirot," he said, standing. "I do not fail, madam, but I cannot protect what I do not know." She hesitated, then shook her head. "I need time. Please, give me until morning." Poirot nodded, though his mind was already cataloging her words, her gestures, her fear. "Until morning, then. But know this, the clock, it ticks, and the cipher waits for no one." He left her room, his thoughts racing. Lady Beatrice was a puzzle, her motives tangled in loyalty and fear. Was she protecting the masked figure, or someone else entirely? The tome might hold answers, but decoding its dense script would take time they might not have. In his own room, Poirot examined the tome again, its pages a labyrinth of secrets. The diagrams of the midnight cipher were precise, almost mechanical, suggesting a device of extraordinary craftsmanship. But the references to a traitor nodded him. The Order was fractured, its members turning on one another. The butler, Professor Elgin, Lady Beatrice each was a piece of the puzzle. But the picture remained incomplete as he pored over the text. A faint noise caught his attention, a creak from the hallway. He moved silently to the door, opening. At a crack, the corridor was empty, but a shadow lingered at the far end, fleeting and gone. The masked figure, perhaps, or another of the Order's agents. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "You think to outwit Poirot," he murmured. "But you shall find, mon ami, that I am not so easily surprised." The night stretched on. The manor a maze of secrets and suspicions. Poirot knew the next hours would be critical. The midnight cipher was within reach, but so was the traitor, and the balance could tip at any moment. He resolved to stay vigilant, his mind a beacon in the darkness, guiding him toward the truth. The following morning, the manor buzzed with renewed tension. The guests gathered in the dining hall, their faces drawn from sleeplessness and fear. Poirot, immaculate as ever in his tailored suit, stood at the head of the table, the tone before him like a judge's gavel. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we are close to the heart of this mystery. The midnight cipher. It is no mere treasure, but a key to power that some among us would kill to possess. But there is a traitor, one who hides behind a mask of loyalty. I urge you, speak now, before it is too late." His eyes swept the room, lingering on Lady Beatrice. She met his gaze, her expression a mix of defiance and dread. The colonel, nursing a bruise from his attack, muttered about conspiracies. Dr. Merton remained silent, his calm unnerving. Professor Elgin, under guard, shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confession incomplete. Before anyone could speak, a scream echoed from the upper floors. The group rushed upstairs, Poirot at the forefront, in the hallway. They found a maid, pale and trembling, pointing to an open window. "I saw him," she cried. The man in the black mask, climbing down the trellis. Poirot leaned out the window, his eyes scanning the grounds. The figure was gone, but a scrap of black velvet caught on the trellis confirmed the maid's story. "The masked figure," Poirot said, turning to the group. "He is bold, but careless. And carelessness, Mzamis, is the downfall of even the cleverest criminal." He returned to the dining hall, his mind racing. The masked figure was the key, perhaps the traitor, perhaps the leader of the Order. The locket, mentioned in the next chapter, would soon provide a clue. But for now, Poirot focused on the tome. Its secrets were the path to the cipher, and the cipher was the path to the truth. As the morning light filtered through the manor's windows, Poirot felt the weight of the case pressing down. The underground chamber had revealed much, but also raised new questions. Lady Beatrice's partial confession, the trap. The tome all were threads in a tapestry of deception. He would need to be meticulous, relentless, to unravel it before the Order struck again. The chapter drew to a close with Poirot seated at a desk, the tome open before him, his pencil tracing the cryptic symbols. The manor, with its creaking floors and hidden passages, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his next move. The midnight cipher was close, but so was danger, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct, was ready to face both. Chapter 7. The masked figure there in Ravenwood Manor hung heavy with suspicion, the kind of tension that clung to the walls like damp moss. Hercule Poirot, his mustache impeccably trimmed despite the late hour, stood in the library, the brass key from the greenhouse glinting faintly in his hand. Its etched symbols caught the candlelight, whispering secrets yet to be unraveled. The journal of Lord Ravenwood lay open on the oak table, its pages brittle but brimming with cryptic references to the Order of the Crescent and their coveted midnight cipher. Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with activity, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that grew more intricate with each passing hour. The manor was a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Guests moved through its halls like chess pieces, each with their own motives, their own secrets. The scream from the masquerade ball 2 nights ago still echoed in Poirot's mind. A guest, Mr. Harrow, found lifeless with a coded note clutched in his hand. Since then, another cipher had appeared, slipped under Poirot's door, and a third had been uncovered in the clock tower alongside a map fragment. The stakes were rising. and Poirot sensed the unseen hand of the order tightening its grip. The mysterious figure in the black velvet mask, glimpsed fleetingly at the ball and again in the greenhouse, was the key to unlocking this deadly game. Poirot adjusted his bow tie, his eyes scanning the library's towering shelves. The room was a cathedral of knowledge, its walls lined with leather-bound tomes, their spines cracked with age. The journal had led him here, to this very room, with its mention of a guardian of secrets hidden within the manor's heart. But the library had already yielded one treasure, the dusty journal itself, found behind a hidden panel in the ballroom. Now, Poirot suspected it held another clue, one that would bring him closer to the masked figure and the midnight cipher. He paced the room, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. The guests were restless, their alibis fraying under scrutiny. Lady Beatrice, the glamorous heiress, had admitted to a scandalous affair with Lord Ravenwood, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she spoke. Professor Elgin, the nervous scholar, had confessed to studying ancient ciphers, his hands trembling as he described their complexity. The retired colonel, Sir Reginald, carried himself with military precision, but avoided questions about his past. And then there was the butler, Mr. Grayson, whose impeccable service masked a quiet intensity that Poirot found unsettling. The masked figure, however, was the enigma that consumed him. Twice now, Poirot had glimpsed the figure, once at the ball, slipping through the crowd like a wraith, and again in the greenhouse, where a sudden attack had left Poirot unharmed but shaken. The figure's black velvet mask, adorned with silver filigree, concealed their identity, but their movements were deliberate, calculated. They were no mere guest, Poirot was certain. They were a player in this deadly game, perhaps the orchestrator of the murders that had stained Ravenwood's halls. A soft creak interrupted his thoughts. Poirot froze, his hand tightening around the brass key. The sound came from the far end of the library, where a tall window overlooked the manor's sprawling gardens. The curtain swayed slightly, though no breeze stirred the air. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He moved toward the window, his steps measured, his senses alert. The moonlight cast long shadows across the floor, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of movement, a silhouette against the glass. Key Estate, L.A. He called softly, his voice steady but laced with authority. No answer came, but the curtains twitched again. Poirot's hand slipped into his pocket, where a small penknife rested, a precaution he rarely needed but always carried. He approached the window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtain with a swift motion. Nothing. The window was latched, the garden beyond cloaked in darkness. But as Poirot turned, his eyes caught a glint on the floor, a small silver button, its surface engraved with a crescent moon. He knelt to retrieve it, his fingers brushing the cold metal. It was no ordinary button. It matched the filigree on the masked figure's attire. A clue, perhaps, but also a warning. The figure had been here, watching him. Poirot pocketed the button and returned to the journal, his mind racing. The masked figure was bold, leaving traces of their presence as if daring Poirot to pursue them. But boldness could be a weakness, a crack in their armor. He flipped through the journal's pages, searching for any mention of a crescent moon symbol. A passage caught his eye, written in Lord Ravenwood's spidery hand. The guardian of the cipher wears the moon's mark, a mask of shadow and silver. They watch from the edges, unseen but ever present. To find them, follow the path of thorns. Where the heart of the manor beats, the path of thorns intrigue him. Ravenwood Manor was surrounded by sprawling gardens, including a notorious hedge maze, its walls thick with thorny brambles. Poirot had seen it from the library window, its twisting paths illuminated faintly by moonlight. Could the masked figure be hiding there, using the maze as a sanctuary? It was a risk to venture out alone, but Poirot was not one to shy away from danger when the truth was at stake. He slipped the journal into his coat and left the library, moving silently through the manor's corridors. The guests were gathered in the drawing room, their voices a low hum of accusation and fear. Poirot avoided them, descending a narrow staircase to the manor's rear entrance. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and roses. The hedge maze loomed ahead, its dark silhouette a challenge in itself. Poirot entered the maze, the brass key still in his pocket, the silver button await against his palm. The paths twisted and turned, the thorn snagging at his coat as he moved deeper into the labyrinth. The moonlight barely penetrated the dense foliage, and every rustle set his nerves on edge. He relied on his memory of the maze's layout, glimpsed briefly from an upstairs window, to guide his steps. Left, right, left again. The path seemed to shift, disorienting him. A sudden sound of twigs snapping made him pause. He turned, his eyes scanning the shadows. There, at the edge of the path, stood the masked figure. The black velvet mask gleamed faintly, the silver filigree catching the moonlight. They stood motionless, a specter in the darkness, their cloak blending with the night. "Monsieur, or perhaps madame," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "You have led Hercule Poirot on a merry chase, but the game, it ends here. Reveal yourself, and let us speak as civilized people." The figure did not respond. Instead, they turned and darted down a side path, their cloak billowing behind them. Poirot gave chase, his heart pounding but his mind sharp. The maze seemed to conspire against him, its paths narrowing, the thorns clawing at his sleeves. But he pressed on, driven by the need to unmask this phantom. The chase led to the maze's center, a small clearing with a stone fountain at its heart. The figure stood there, their back to Poirot, their posture tense. Poirot slowed, his breath steadying. He noticed something glinting on the ground near the fountain, a small object. Dropped in haste, he approached cautiously, keeping the figure in his peripheral vision. The object was a locket, its silver surface etched with a crescent moon. Poirot picked it up, his fingers deftly opening the clasp. Inside was a miniature portrait of a man, with sharp features and piercing eyes, Lord Ravenwood himself. An inscription on the locket's inner lid read, "To my heart's keeper, forever bound by the moon." Poirot's mind raced. The locket suggested a personal connection to Lord Ravenwood, perhaps a lover or a confidant. But the masked figure's presence here, in the maze, implied something more sinister. Were they an heir to Ravenwood's secrets, or a betrayer of his trust? "You carry the mark of the crescent," Poirot said, holding up the locket, "but you are no guardian. You are a hunter." "None? Hunting the midnight cipher, as others have before you. Tell me, what is your purpose?" The figure turned slowly, their mask an impenetrable barrier. For a moment, Poirot thought they might speak, but instead, they lunged forward, a dagger flashing. In their hand, Poirot sidestepped, his reflexes honed by years of facing danger. The figure stumbled, their dagger grazing the fountain's edge, and Poirot seized the moment, grabbing their wrist and twisting it until the weapon fell. The figure broke free, shoving Poirot back and fleeing into the maze. Poirot did not pursue. The locket was clue enough for now. He examined it again, noting the craftsmanship, the weight of the silver. It was no trinket, it was a relic, tied to the order and its secrets. Returning to the manor, Poirot made his way to Lord Ravenwood's study, a room he had not yet fully explored. The locket's inscription lingered in his mind, the heart's keeper. The study, with its mahogany desk and walls lined with portraits, felt like the manor's beating heart. Poirot searched methodically, his fingers probing for hidden compartments. Behind the portrait of Lord Ravenwood, he found a small safe, its lock engraved with a crescent moon. The brass key did not fit, but the locket's shape matched a subtle indentation in the safe's surface. Poirot pressed it gently, and with a soft click, the safe opened. Inside was a second map fragment, its edges worn, but its lines clear, depicting a section of the manor's lower levels. Alongside it was a list of names written in Ravenwood's hand, members of the Order of the Crescent. Poirot presumed. One name stood out, Grayson, the butler. Poirot's suspicions about Mr. Grayson deepened. The man's quiet efficiency. His knowledge of the manor's workings now took on a darker hue. Was he the masked figure, or merely a pawn in their game? Poirot closed the safe, pocketing the map fragment and the list. He would watch Grayson closely, but he would not act yet. The truth required patience, and Poirot was a master of waiting. As dawn broke, casting pale light through the study's windows, Poirot sat at the desk, the locket and map fragment before him. The masked figure was still at large, but Poirot was closing in. The maze, the locket, the safe, all were pieces of a puzzle that pointed to the midnight cipher and the order's true purpose. He would need to move carefully, for the manor was a nest of vipers, and the next strike could be fatal. The day passed in a blur of interviews and observations. Poirot kept the locket hidden, revealing nothing of his discovery. He spoke with Lady Beatrice, noting the way her eyes darted when he mentioned Lord Ravenwood. He questioned Professor Elgin, whose stammer grew worse under pressure. Sir Reginald, the colonel, deflected with gruff anecdotes, but his hands betrayed a slight tremor. And Grayson, ever the perfect butler, served tea with a smile that did not reach his eyes. That evening, Poirot lingered in the dining hall, watching Grayson as he moved among the guests. The butler's movements were precise, but Poirot noticed a hesitation when he passed the grand staircase. As if he were listening for something, Poirot followed discreetly, trailing Grayson to the servants' quarters. There, in a small room, lit by a single candle, Poirot overheard a whispered conversation. "The vault is close," Grayson said, his voice low. "The master will not wait." Another voice, muffled but sharp, replied, "Then move faster. The detective is too close." Poirot's heart quickened. The master could only be the masked figure. Grayson was involved, but not alone. Poirot retreated before he was discovered, his mind racing with possibilities. The vault, the map, fragments, the midnight cipher, it was all converging. And Poirot knew the next move would be critical. He returned to his room, locking the door behind him. The map fragment from the safe lay on his desk, its lines a tantalizing promise of answers. The locket, too, seemed to pulse with secrets, its portrait of Lord Ravenwood a silent witness to the manor. As dark history, Poirot leaned back in his chair, his eyes half closed, his little gray cells working tirelessly. The masked figure was bold, but they had made mistakes. The button, the locket, the safe, all were breadcrumbs leading Poirot closer to the truth. He would set a trap, not with force but with cunning. The butler would be watched, the guests scrutinized, and the masked figure drawn into the open. The midnight cipher was within reach, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until it was his. As the manor settled into an uneasy silence, Poirot planned his next move. The hedge maze had revealed one secret, but the manor held many more. The study, the vault, the order of the crescent, they were all threads in a tapestry of deceit, and at its center was the masked figure, a shadow Poirot would soon bring into the light. Chapter 8. The butler's gambit. Grand dining hall of Ravenwood Manor gleamed under the flickering light of a dozen chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering rainbows across the polished mahogany table. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the room, his small, precise frame commanding the attention of the assembled guests. The air was thick with tension, the kind that follows a storm but precedes a reckoning. The guests, Lady Beatrice, Professor Elgin, the retired Colonel Warwick, and a handful of others sat or stood in uneasy silence, their eyes darting between Poirot and the butler, Mr. Grayson, whose normally impeccable posture now seemed to sag under an invisible weight. Poirot's mustache twitched slightly as he adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture as deliberate as every word he was about to utter. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured, cutting through the murmurs like a knife through silk. "We have reached a most critical juncture in this affair. The death of one guest, the attack upon another, and the presence of cryptic ciphers all point to a singular truth. There is a serpent among us, coiled and ready to strike. And I, Hercule Poirot, have uncovered his identity. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice's gloved hand tightened around her wine glass, her emerald eyes narrowing. Professor Elgin, seated near the far end of the table, adjusted his spectacles, his fingers trembling slightly. Colonel Warwick, his face ruddy from years of military campaigns and perhaps a touch too much brandy, leaned forward, his bushy eyebrows raised. The other guests, minor aristocrats, a reclusive novelist, and a diplomat's widow exchanged worried glances, their masks from the earlier ball now discarded. Yet their faces still veiled in suspicion. Poirot's gaze settled on Mr. Grayson, who stood by the sideboard, his hands clasped behind his back. The butler's face was a study in composure, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught the faintest bead of sweat at his temple. "Mr. Grayson," Poirot said, his tone almost gentle, "you have served Ravenwood Manor with the utmost diligence, the perfect butler unseen, unheard, yet always present. But it is precisely this invisibility that has allowed you to move through these events unnoticed. Until now." The butler's eyes widened, but he said nothing. The room seemed to hold its breath. Poirot continued, pacing slowly along the length of the table, his polished shoes clicking against the parquet floor. "The Order of the Crescent, this secret society that haunts these walls, has left its mark in every clue. We have uncovered the wax seal, the coded notes, the journal of Lord Ravenwood himself, and yet it is not the grand gestures of the powerful that betray them, but the small oversights of those who serve them. You, Mr. Grayson, are a member of this order, are you not?" A murmur of shock passed through the guests. Lady Beatrice stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is outrageous, Monsieur Poirot. Grayson has served this household for decades. To accuse him without evidence, Lady Beatrice," Poirot interrupted, raising a hand. "But I have evidence, and it is most compelling. Allow me to recount the facts." As Hercule Poirot seized them, he reached into his waistcoat pocket and produced a small, folded piece of parchment, the third cipher note, discovered in the butler's quarters only hours earlier. He held it aloft, letting the chandelier light catch its edges. "This note, Ms. Amos, was found concealed within a hollowed-out book in Mr. Grayson's private room. A curious place for a butler to keep such a thing, and its contents arcane symbols, much like those of the previous ciphers, point to a location of great significance. The chapel on the estate grounds." Grayson's composure cracked, his lips parting as if to speak, but Poirot pressed on. "But this is not all. The locket, dropped by the masked figure in the hedge maze, bore an inscription linking it to Lord Ravenwood, and within the Lord's study, hidden behind a portrait, I found a list of the Order's members. Your name, Mr. Grayson, was among them." The butler took a step back, his face paling. "This is preposterous," he said, his voice low but unsteady. "I am but a servant, Monsieur Poirot. I have no part in such schemes." "Then why," Poirot said, his voice rising with a sudden intensity, "did you attempt to flee when I entered your quarters this afternoon? Why, when I questioned you about the journal, did your answers falter? And why, monsieur, does this," he held up the brass key, its etched symbols glinting, "fit so perfectly into the lock of a hidden compartment in your desk? Where I found this very note, the room erupted in chaos." Colonel Warwick slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "By Jove, man, explain yourself." Lady Beatrice sank back into her chair, her face a mask of disbelief. Professor Elgin, however, remained silent, his eyes fixed on the table as if studying its grain for hidden meaning. Grayson's shoulders slumped, and for a moment it seemed he might collapse. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, he turned and bolted toward the dining hall's double doors. But Poirot, anticipating such a move, had positioned himself strategically. With a swift gesture, He signaled to the footman stationed at the door's men he had briefed earlier. They seized Grayson, pinning his arms as he struggled. "Unhand me," Grayson shouted, his voice raw with desperation. "You don't understand. I had no choice. No choice." Poirot echoed, stepping closer. "Then explain, monsieur. Explain to Hercule Poirot why a man of your loyalty would betray his master's house. Explain why you serve the Order of the Crescent and who it is that pulls your strings." Grayson's resistance faltered, his body sagging in the footman's grip. His eyes, wild with fear, darted around the room before settling on Poirot. "It was the masked figure," he whispered. "They forced me. They knew things about my past, my family. They threatened to destroy everything if I didn't comply." Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. "And what did they ask of you, Mr. Grayson? To spy? To steal? To kill?" "No," Grayson cried. "Never to kill. I was to watch, to report, to place the notes where they could be found, the ciphers they were meant to lead you to the chapel. That's all I know. I swear it." Poirot nodded slowly, his mind racing. The butler's confession was a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. The masked figure, still at large, was the true orchestrator, and Grayson was but a pawn. "Very well," Poirot said. "You will remain here, under guard, until the authorities arrive. But first, you will accompany me to this chapel. The truth, it seems, lies there." The guests, now subdued, watched as Poirot led the way out of the dining hall. Grayson flanked by the footman. Lady Beatrice rose to follow, her expression unreadable, while Professor Elgin lingered behind, his fingers tracing the edge of his spectacles. Colonel Warwick muttered something about damnable conspiracies, but joined the procession, his heavy footsteps echoing in the corridor. The chapel lay at the edge of the estate, a Gothic structure of weathered stone, its stained glass windows dark under the moonless sky. Poirot pushed open the heavy oak door, revealing a dimly lit interior where candles flickered on a ceremonial altar. The air was thick with the scent of wax and old wood, and the crescent moon symbol was carved into the stone floor, its curves catching the candle light. Poirot approached the altar, his eyes scanning its surface. At its center was a slot, perfectly sized for the brass key. He inserted it. Turning it with a soft click, a panel slid open, revealing a small, intricately carved box. Inside was the final fragment of the map, its edges worn, but its markings clear. Poirot held it up, aligning it with the other fragments he carried. Together, they formed a complete map, its lines converging on a single point, a vault beneath the manor, the midnight cipher. Poirot murmured, his voice barely audible. "It is close, Mzamas, very close." But as he spoke, a shadow moved. In the corner of the chapel, a flicker of black velvet, gone before anyone could react. The masked figure, it seemed, was watching. Poirot's hand tightened around the map, his mind already calculating his next move. The vault awaited, and, with it, the truth behind the Order's schemes. He turned to the group, his voice steady. "We return to the manor. Tomorrow, we descend to the vault. But tonight, we remain vigilant. The serpent is still among us, and it will strike again if we are not prepared." As they left the chapel, the wind howled through the estate, carrying with it the promise of secrets yet to be unveiled. Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the final threads of the mystery. The butler's gambit had been exposed, but the game was far from over. The night passed in uneasy silence, the manor's halls heavy with suspicion. Poirot retired to his room, but sleep eluded him. He sat at a small desk, the map fragments spread before him, their lines forming a labyrinth that mirrored the twists of the case. The vault, he knew, held the key to the midnight cipher, but also to the identity of the masked figure. Grayson's confession had confirmed the Order's reach, but it had also raised new questions. Who was the figure in black velvet, and what was their true aim? At dawn, Poirot rose, his mind clear. He summoned the guests to the library, where he laid out the map. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "today we end this affair. The vault beneath the manor holds the answers we seek, but I must warn you the path is dangerous, and not all among us can be trusted." Lady Beatrice's eyes flickered with something unreadable fear, perhaps, or defiance. Professor Elgin, still pale from the previous night's revelations, nodded silently. Colonel Warwick, ever the soldier, squared his shoulders, ready for action. The others, less central to the drama, but no less involved, murmured their agreement. Poirot led them to the wine cellar, where the secret passage from Chapter 5 awaited. The map guided them to a stone wall, its surface unremarkable save for a faint crescent moon carved into its center. Poirot pressed the symbol, and the wall rumbled, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The group descended, their lanterns casting long shadows on the damp stone walls. At the bottom, they found a heavy iron door, its surface etched with symbols matching those on the cipher notes. Poirot aligned the map fragments, tracing their lines to a sequence of symbols. With careful precision, he pressed them in order, and the door groaned open, revealing the vault beyond. Inside, the air was cold, the walls lined with ancient carvings. At the center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a crystalline device, the midnight cipher itself. Its surface shimmered with etched symbols, each one glowing faintly in the lantern light. Poirot approached, his heart racing. This was no mere treasure. It was a key, a record, a weapon. But before he could touch it, a voice echoed from the shadows. "Step away, Monsieur Poirot." The masked figure emerged, a pistol glinting in their hand. The black velvet mask obscured their face, but their voice was sharp, commanding. "You've come far," they said, "but the cipher is mine." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm. "And who, monsieur, are you to claim such a prize? The order's puppet, or its master?" The figure laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You think you've solved it, don't you? But you're only scratching the surface. The cipher isn't just wealth, it's power. Power to control, to destroy, to rebuild." Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues: the locket, the journal, the list. "You are no stranger to this manor," he said slowly. "You knew Lord Ravenwood. You were betrayed by the order, none, and now you seek revenge." The figure stiffened, their grip on the pistol tightening. "Clever, Poirot, but it changes nothing." Before they could act, Colonel Warwick lunged, knocking the pistol from their hand. The figure spun, fleeing into the shadows. But Poirot was ready. He had anticipated this moment. Positioning the footmen at the vault's only exit, they seized the figure, tearing away the mask to reveal a face that drew a gasp from Lady Beatrice. "Edward," she cried, her voice breaking. "My brother, you're alive." The man Edward, presumed dead for years, glared at her, his face twisted with bitterness. "You abandoned me, Beatrice. You all did. The order promised me everything, then took it away. The cipher is my vengeance." Poirot stepped forward, his voice steady. "Vengeance, monsieur, is a poor substitute for justice. The cipher will not serve you, it will destroy you, as it has destroyed others." Edward's defiance faltered, and he slumped in the footman's grip. Poirot turned to the cipher, lifting it carefully from the pedestal. Its weight was light, but its significance was immense. "This device," he said, addressing the group, "is no mere treasure. It is a record of the order's crimes, a key to their downfall, and I, Hercule Poirot, will ensure it reaches the proper authorities." The vault fell silent, the weight of his words settling over them. Lady Beatrice wept softly, her brother's betrayal cutting deeper than any cipher. Professor Elgin, his own role as an order member exposed, hung his head. Colonel Warwick, ever practical, muttered about calling the police. As they emerged from the vault, the morning sun broke over Ravenwood Manor, casting long rays through the mist. Poirot held the cipher, its surface cool against his palm. The Case was not yet closed. There were details to confirm, authorities to summon, but the heart of the mystery had been laid bare. He returned to the manor's grand hall, where the guests gathered one final time. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice carrying the weight of triumph. "The midnight cipher is no longer a threat. The Order of the Crescent will answer for their crimes, and Ravenwood Manor will know peace once more." As the authorities arrived, Poirot stepped outside, the cipher secured in a locked case. The manor loomed behind him, its secrets exposed, its shadows banished. He adjusted his hat, a faint smile playing on his lips. The little gray cells had prevailed, as they always did, and so, with the morning mist curling around his feet, Hercule Poirot walked away from Ravenwood Manor, ready for the next challenge, the next cipher, the next truth to unravel. Chapter 9. The vault's guardianthe night air clung to Ravenwood Manor like a shroud, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint tang of iron. Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold of the underground passage, the brass key cold in his palm, its etched symbols catching the flicker of his lantern. The map, painstakingly assembled from 3 fragments, lay folded in his coat pocket, its lines converging on a vault buried deep beneath the manor's foundations. Beside him stood Captain Hastings, ever loyal, but visibly unnerved, and Dr. Clara Whitmore, the manor's resident physician, whose calm demeanor masked the keen intellect Poirot had come to respect. The rest of the guests remained above, under the watchful eye of the local constable, summoned after the butler's dramatic confession. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, his voice steady despite the darkness ahead, "we stand on the precipice of truth. The midnight cipher awaits. But so, I fear, does its guardian." His mustache twitched as he adjusted his grip on the lantern, its light casting long shadows across the stone steps descending into the earth. Hastings swallowed hard, his hand resting on the revolver, tucked into his belt. "I don't like this. Poirot, that masked figure Lady Beatrice's brother, you say. He's been one step ahead of us the whole time. What if he's waiting down there? Then, Hastings." "We shall be ready," Poirot replied, his eyes glinting with determination. "The little gray cells, they do not falter in the face of danger. Come, we descend." Dr. Whitmore, her medical bag slung over her shoulder, nodded silently. Her presence had been Poirot's suggestion, a precaution against the Order of the Crescent's penchant for traps. The trio moved forward, their footsteps echoing in the narrow passage. The air grew colder, the walls damp with moss, and the faint drip of water punctuated the silence. The map had led them here, to a vault said to house the midnight cipher, a device whispered to hold power beyond mere wealth. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues, the coded notes, the journal, the locket's inscription. The cipher was no mere treasure, it was a key to the Order's darkest secrets. The passage widened into a circular chamber, its walls adorned with crescent moon carvings, their curves gleaming faintly in the lantern's glow. At the chamber's center stood a massive stone door, its surface etched with a complex array of symbols, circles, lines, and stars interwoven in a pattern that seemed to pulse with intent. 3 slots, each the size of a map fragment, were carved into the door's surface, flanked by a larger slot shaped for the brass key. "This is it," Dr. Whitmore murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The vault. Poirot approached the door, his fingers tracing the symbols. But it is not merely a door. It is a puzzle, a final test of the Order's design. He unfolded the map, aligning each fragment with its corresponding slot. The first fragment, found in the clock tower, fit with a satisfying click. The second, from the Lord's study, slid into place with a faint grinding of stone. The third, recovered from the chapel's altar, completed the trio, and the door shuddered, dust cascading from its edges. "Now, the key," Poirot said, inserting the brass key into the central slot. He turned it slowly, the mechanism resisting. At first, then yielding with a deep, resonant clank, the door began to move. sliding inward to reveal a cavernous chamber beyond. But before they could step forward, a shadow detached itself from the darkness, a figure cloaked in black. The velvet mask gleaming in the lantern light. "Stop," the figure hissed, his voice low and menacing. He stepped into the light, revealing a tall, weary frame, his eyes burning with a mix of desperation and rage. In his hand gleamed a curved dagger, its blade catching the lantern's glow. "You've come far, Poirot, but the cipher is mine." Poirot raised a hand, his expression unruffled. "Monsieur, I presume you are Edward Langley, Lady Beatrice's brother, long thought dead. Your masquerade has been most convincing, but the game, it is over." The figure stiffened, then let out a bitter laugh. "You think you've unmasked me? You know nothing of my purpose. The order betrayed my family, stole everything from us. The midnight cipher will expose them, and I will have my revenge." Hastings drew his revolver, but Poirot gestured for him to lower it. "Revenge, Monsieur Langley, is a poor substitute for justice. The cipher, it is not a weapon for your vendetta. It is a record, a ledger of the order's crimes. Let us open the vault together, and the truth will be revealed." Langley's grip on the dagger tightened, his eyes darting between Poirot and the open door. For a moment, the chamber was silent save for the drip of water and the faint creak of the manor above. Then, with a snarl, Langley lunged, his dagger aimed at Poirot's chest. Dr. Whitmore reacted first, swinging her medical bag with surprising force. It struck Langley's arm, sending the dagger clattering to the stone floor. Hastings tackled him, pinning him against the wall as Poirot calmly retrieved the weapon. "Merci, Doctor," Poirot said, nodding to Whitmore. "Your timing, it is impeccable." Langley struggled, his mask slipping to reveal a scarred face, the features unmistakably those of Lady Beatrice's kin. "You don't understand," he spat. "The order destroyed us. My sister, she tried to protect me, but they hunted me like an animal. The cipher is my only leverage." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Your pain, it is real, monsieur, but your path, it leads only to more blood. Come, let us see what the vault holds. The truth, it will serve you better than vengeance." Reluctantly, Langley ceased struggling, and Hastings bound his hands with a cord from Whitmore's bag. Together, they stepped into the vault, the lantern casting light across a chamber lined with ancient stone shelves. At its center stood a pedestal, and atop it, a crystalline device no larger than a pocket watch, its surface etched with the same symbols as the key. The midnight cipher. Poirot approached, his fingers brushing the device's surface. It hummed faintly, as if alive, its facets refracting the light into a kaleidoscope of colors. "Magnifique," he murmured. "This is no mere artifact. It is a cipher, in truth a key to knowledge, not gold." Dr. Whitmore examined the pedestal, noting a slot beneath the cipher. "There's an inscription," she said, squinting. "It reads, 'The truth lies in alignment.' Perhaps the key activates it." Poirot nodded. Inserting the brass key into the pedestal's slot, the cipher glowed brighter, and a hidden panel in the pedestal opened, revealing a leather-bound ledger. Poirot opened it, his eyes scanning pages filled with names, dates, and deeds, crimes committed by the Order of the Crescent, from extortion to murder, spanning decades. "This," Poirot said, holding up the ledger, "is the true power of the midnight cipher. It is a record, a testament to the Order's corruption. With this, they can be brought to justice." Langley's shoulders slumped, his anger giving way to resignation. "Then it's over," he whispered. I thought it would give me power over them." "It will, monsieur," Poirot said gently, "but not through vengeance. Through the law." The chamber trembled suddenly, a low rumble echoing from above. Dust rained from the ceiling, and Hastings looked up, alarmed. "Poirot, the manor. Something's happening." "Vite," Poirot urged. tucking the ledger under his arm and securing the cipher in his pocket. "We must return to the surface." They retraced their steps, Langley in tow, as the rumbling grew louder. Emerging into the manor's wine cellar, they found the source. A fire had broken out in the upper floors, its smoke curling through the halls. The constable met them, his face pale. "The guests are safe, but someone set the fire," he shouted. "We need to get out now." Poirot's mind raced. The fire was no accident. It was the Order's final gambit, a desperate attempt to destroy the evidence. He led the group through the smoke-filled corridors, his calm demeanor a beacon in the chaos. They emerged into the night air, coughing but unharmed. As the manor's roof began to collapse, in the distance, sirens wailed, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. Poirot turned to Langley, who stood silently, his face illuminated by the flames. "You have a choice, monsieur," Poirot said. "Help us bring the Order to justice, and your story will be heard." Langley nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the burning manor. "I'll tell you everything," he said. "The Order, they're bigger than you know." As the authorities arrived, Poirot handed over the ledger and the cipher, ensuring their safekeeping. The night was far from over, but the vault's secrets were secure, and the truth was within reach. He glanced at the manor, its grandeur reduced to ash, and felt a quiet satisfaction. The midnight cipher had been guarded, but not by a man. It was guarded by the weight of its own truth. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. The authorities took Langley into custody, his confession providing a roadmap to dismantle the Order's network. Dr. Whitmore tended to the guests, her steady hands a contrast to the chaos. Hastings, ever the loyal friend, recounted their adventure with a mix of awe and relief. As dawn broke, Poirot stood alone on the manor's lawn, the cipher still in his pocket. He would deliver it to the proper authorities, but for now, he allowed himself a moment to reflect. The case had tested his little gray cells, but they had not failed him. The vault's guardian had been unmasked, and the midnight cipher's secrets would soon bring down an empire of crime. He turned to Hastings, who approached with a weary smile. "Well, Poirot, another case solved, but I must say, this one was a bit too close for comfort." Chapter 10. The final unmasking. The grand hall of Ravenwood Manor gleamed under the flickering light of a dozen chandeliers, their crystal prisms casting rainbows across the polished oak floor. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of beeswax candles mingling with the faint musk of old tapestries. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, precise figure a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding him. His mustache was impeccably groomed, his patent leather shoes gleamed, and his eyes, those sharp, green-gray eyes, swept over the assembled guests with the calm assurance of a man who had already unraveled the knot of their secrets. The midnight cipher, a crystalline device etched with intricate symbols, rested on a velvet-draped table beside him, its facets catching the light like a prism of truth. The guests, unmasked now after the masquerade's grim turn, sat in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, their faces a gallery of emotions: fear, defiance, curiosity, and guilt. Lady Beatrice, her elegant features pale but composed, sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Professor Elgin, his spectacles slipping down his nose, fidgeted nervously, his earlier confession as a member of the Order of the Crescent weighing heavily on him. The retired colonel, his face bruised from the attack in the clock tower, sat ramrod straight, his military bearing unbroken. The butler, now exposed and subdued, stood near the back under the watchful eye of a burly footman, and at the edge of the circle, the mysterious figure revealed as Lady Beatrice's brother, Edmund Ravenwood, long thought dead, stood with his wrists bound, his dark eyes burning with a mixture of defiance and despair. Poirot cleared his throat, a small, deliberate sound that silenced the murmurs rippling through the room. "Zamis," he began, his voice clear and measured, "we have arrived at the denouement of this most curious affair. The events of these past days, the murder, the ciphers, the hidden passages, and the secrets of Ravenwood Manor have woven a tapestry of deception. But now, Hercule Poirot shall unravel it, thread by thread, until the truth stands before us, as clear as the morning sun. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly as if listening to the whispers of his own thoughts. Let us begin with the heart of this mystery, the midnight cipher. He gestured to the crystalline device, its surface glinting ominously. This object, so coveted by the Order of the Crescent, is not, as many of you believed, a key to unimaginable wealth. It is something far more dangerous. It is a record, a ledger of secrets etched in symbols that only the initiated can read. It holds the names, the crimes, and the plans of the order of society that has operated in the shadows for centuries, manipulating events, amassing power, and eliminating those who stand in their way. A gasp rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice's hands tightened, her knuckles whitening. Professor Elgin adjusted his spectacles, his face a mask of unease. Poirot continued, undeterred. The murder of the guest at the masquerade ball, the coded notes, the hidden passages, all were part of a desperate struggle to possess this cipher. But to understand the why, we must first understand the who. He turned to the butler, whose head hung low. Monsieur Grayson, the butler of Ravenwood Manor, was not the mastermind, as some of you might have assumed. None. He was a pawn, coerced by threats against his family to serve the order. His role was to watch, to report, and to ensure that the secrets of the manor remained hidden. But he was not the one who struck the fatal blow at the ball, nor was he the architect of this intricate plot. Grayson's shoulders sagged further, a silent confirmation of Poirot's words. Poirot's gaze shifted to Professor Elgin. You, Monsieur Elgin, played a more active role. As a scholar of ancient ciphers, you were drawn into the order's web. Tempted by the promise of knowledge, you sought the midnight cipher not for wealth, but for the intellectual triumph of decoding its secrets. Yet, your ambition made you reckless. Your attempt to steal the map fragment in the clock tower betrayed your true allegiance. Elgin's face flushed, but he said nothing, his eyes fixed on the floor. Poirot's attention moved to the colonel. Colonel Hargrove, you are a man of honor. Yet even you were not immune to the allure of the cipher. Your presence here was no accident. You were invited to test your loyalty to the order, a test you passed by remaining silent about their existence. But your silence did not make you a murderer. The colonel's jaw tightened, but he nodded slightly, acknowledging Poirot's insight. Poirot's eyes then settled on Lady Beatrice, who met his gaze with a mixture of defiance and fear. Lady Beatrice, your role in this affair is perhaps the most complex. You came to Ravenwood Manor not as a mere guest, but as a woman bound by family and secrets. Your connection to Lord Ravenwood was no scandal, as you claimed, but a bond of blood. Your brother, Edmund Ravenwood, presumed dead, was the true architect of this deadly game. Edmund's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent, his bound hands twitching slightly. Poirot continued, his voice steady but piercing. Edmund Ravenwood, the man who vanished years ago, did not perish as the world believed. He survived, nursing a grudge against the order that betrayed him. His return to Ravenwood Manor was no coincidence. It was a calculated move to seize the midnight cipher, not for power, but for revenge. He orchestrated the murder at the ball, planning the coded note to draw suspicion away from himself. He moved through the manor's shadows, using his knowledge of its secrets to outwit us all. But he underestimated Hercule Poirot. A murmur of shock rippled through the guests. Lady Beatrice's composure cracked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You don't understand, she whispered. He was protecting me. The order they threatened to destroy us both. Poirot raised a hand, silencing her gently. Lady Beatrice, I understand more than you think. Your loyalty to your brother blinded you to his crimes. But it does not absolve you of your complicity. You knew of his plans, yet you said nothing, hoping to protect him. But the truth, it cannot be hidden from Hercule Poirot. He turned to the assembled guests, his voice rising with conviction. Let us now piece together the events of this tragic affair. On the night of the masquerade, the guest, a man named Sir Reginald Thorne, was murdered because he, too, was a member of the order, one who had grown curious about the cipher's true nature. Edmund, disguised in his black velvet mask, slipped into the ball and struck Sir Reginald with a poisoned dart, a weapon so subtle it was mistaken for a heart attack until I examined the body. The coded note found in Sir Reginald's hand was a deliberate misdirection, designed to draw attention to the cipher and away from Edmund's true motive. Poirot paused, letting his words sink in. The subsequent ciphers, the hidden passages, the journal, the key, all were part of Edmund's plan to lead us to the vault, where he intended to seize the cipher and expose the order's crimes. But he did not anticipate my presence, nor my ability to see through his web of deception. The attack in the greenhouse, the blackout in the clock tower, the booby trap in the underground chamber, these were his desperate attempts to eliminate those who came too close to the truth. He gestured to the midnight cipher. This device, Mzamas, is no mere trinket. Its symbols, when decoded, reveal a list of the order's members, their crimes, and their plans for domination. It is a weapon of knowledge, one that could dismantle their network and bring them to justice. Edmund sought it not to destroy the order, but to control it, to wield its secrets for his own vengeance. But in doing so, he became the very thing he despised: a manipulator, a murderer. Edmund's voice broke the silence, low and bitter. You speak of justice, Poirot, but you know nothing of betrayal. The order took everything from me: my name, my family, my life. I did what I had to do. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. Monsieur Ravenwood, vengeance is a fire that consumes all in its path. You sought to right a wrong, but you became the villain of your own story. The truth, it is not yours to wield, it belongs to justice. He turned to the guests, his demeanor calm but commanding. I have sent for the authorities, who are even now approaching Ravenwood Manor. They will take custody of the midnight cipher and use its secrets to dismantle the Order of the Crescent. Monsieur Grayson, Professor Elgin, and Monsieur Ravenwood will answer for their roles in this affair. Lady Beatrice, your complicity will be judged, but your cooperation may yet mitigate your fate. As if on cue, the sound of hooves and carriage wheels echoed from the courtyard outside. The guests stirred, their faces a mix of relief and dread. Poirot picked up the midnight cipher, its weight light in his hands but heavy with meaning. The power of truth, Mzamas, is greater than any treasure. It is the light that pierces the darkness, the key that unlocks the chains of deceit. Hercule Poirot has seen it, and he has ensured that it will not be misused. The doors of the grand hall swung open, and a group of constables entered. Led by a stern-faced inspector, Poirot handed the cipher to the inspector, explaining its significance in a few concise words. Edmund was led away, his head bowed, while Lady Beatrice followed, her steps hesitant but resolute. Professor Elgin and the butler were escorted out, their fates uncertain but inevitable. As the guests dispersed, whispering among themselves, Poirot remained in the hall, his gaze lingering on the empty chairs. The chandeliers flickered, casting long shadows across the room. He adjusted his tie, a small gesture of order in the chaos of the night, and turned to leave. The mystery of Ravenwood Manor was solved, the midnight cipher secured, and the Order of the Crescent's secrets laid bare. Outside, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the manor stone facade in hues of gold and pink. Poirot stepped into a waiting carriage, his mind already turning to the next challenge, the next puzzle that awaited his little gray cells. As the carriage rolled away, Ravenwood Manor faded into the morning mist, a silent witness to the triumph Of truth over greed. The journey back to London was quiet, the countryside passing in a blur of green fields and hedgerows. Poirot leaned back in his seat, his eyes half closed, his thoughts a tapestry of clues and conclusions. The midnight cipher had been a formidable adversary, its secrets guarded by death and deception. But Hercule Poirot, with his meticulous mind and unwavering dedication to justice, had prevailed. In his London flat, he would place a small memento of this case, a single crescent moon seal, taken from the original invitation on his mantelpiece, a reminder of the night he unmasked the shadows of Ravenwood Manor. The world would move on, the order would crumble, and the name of Hercule Poirot would remain, a beacon of reason in a world of chaos. And so, as the carriage rattled toward the city, Poirot allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The case was closed, the truth revealed, and the little gray cells, as always, had proven their worth.